So I came across this channel called Dashing David. I see he has made some videos critical of Bugthestards, who shill and White Knight, Bugthesda, and Fallout 76. And that's great, but unfortunately, that's not the whole picture. Digging deeper, I came across another video called I Hate New Vegas. In this video, he lies and slanders the game, and this is something that will not stand. Now, he made this video back in 2017. Maybe his views have changed, but I doubt that because looking at the comments under that video, I can see that he sometimes responds to or hearts comments, even quite recently, but only comments which are negative towards New Vegas or otherwise in agreement with him. When it comes to the vast majority of comments which don't agree with him, he either ignores those comments entirely, or if those comments debunk what he is saying with irrefutable facts and logic, he will just simply respond with a TLDR. TLDR is the sort of response someone gives when they've had their shit pushed in and cannot counter the argument. It's the equivalent of Oxhorn's infamous "dude, wow, just wow" response to me a couple years back, which ultimately led to him false flagging my channel for bullying and having me terminated because he was severely butthurt over being made to look like the incompetent imbecile that he is. Yet he himself can bully people in the comments with impunity, and YouTube won't do anything about it. But that's neither here nor there. I'll give Dashing David credit because, as far as I know, he's not deleting comments that disagree with him or false flagging people for bullying or whatever, like Oxhorn does. At least not that I'm aware of. There's plenty of negative comments on his video, so it seems like he's not censoring anything, and I'll give him credit for that much. But even though he doesn't delete the critical comments, he isn't addressing them either. He either ignores them or he dude wow just, he TLDRs them. I'll also give Dashing David credit because his name is very
apt.
Because he is dashing in the sense that he dashes away from facts and logic. Anyway, New Vegas is widely regarded as the best game in the Fallout series, so it's no surprise that this video by Dashing David saying he hates it has the like-dislike ratio that it does. The overwhelming majority disagree with his opinion, and it shows that he is in the minority. Of course, Gandhi once said that even if you are a minority of one, the truth is still the truth. That is true. However, Dashing David's video is not the truth. It is full of lies and misinformation. Despite slandering the greatest game ever made, he has the gall to ask people to like, comment, and subscribe. But as we can plainly see, people are by and large not heeding his demand for them to like his video. That's what happens when you have an unpopular opinion, which in itself should tell him something. The funny thing is that I've seen another video of his where he tears another YouTuber apart for having a bad like-dislike ratio on one of their videos.
The very simple fact is you don't get a dislike ratio like this unless a ton of people are disagreeing with you. And if you go look at his comments, a ton of people, of course, telling him that he's wrong, rose-tinted spectacles.
Now, is that hypocritical or what? I too have made a video which has a bad like-dislike ratio. The one I made about Oxhorn being a homophobe because of the articles he wrote where he said the majority has the right to discriminate against gay people and that gays should be denied employment and housing and so on. It's a fact that he wrote these articles, and it is a fact that by writing these articles, that makes him a homophobe. So my video was 100% correct and true. But nevertheless, it is unpopular, as you can see. But again, facts are facts. Whether Oxhorn supporters are butthurt about him being a bigot or not, he is still a bigot. Deal with it. But yes, I do understand the whole bad like-dislike ratio thing. That in itself means nothing as far as facts are concerned. An unpopular fact is still a fact. It is a fact that Dashing David hates New Vegas, or so he says, but most, if not all, of the reasons he cites for why he hates it are either false or can be explained due to the time constraints the developers faced or whatever. And I'll get to that. So anyway, he tells people like, comment, and subscribe. And further down in the description, there's a link to the now defunct Sugar Bombed website, which was the most Bugthestard website there ever was, other than the official Bethesda website, of course. If I remember correctly, Mr. Matty Plays was one of the founders of Sugar Bombed, and he promoted the hell out of it on his channel during the time it existed.
Check out sugarbomb.com, the place by Bethesda fans for Bethesda fans. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.
Matty and whoever else made that site did so because they weren't happy with the No Mutants Allowed fan site, which is the original Fallout fan site that has existed since even before the first Fallout game was released, if you can believe that. Matty and whoever else made Sugar Bombed did not like the classic Fallout games, and they were far up Todd Howard's asshole. Yet, No Mutants Allowed did not kiss Todd's ass the way they did. So they created Sugar Bombed. And that site became ground zero for the Bugthestard infestation. But now, Sugar Bombed is defunct, and Mr. Matty Plays is no longer the Bugthestard that he used to be. Nevertheless, No Mutants Allowed is still going. The Bugthestards thought they were going to replace us, but instead we have outlasted them.
Who's laughing now?
But anyway, the fact that Dashing David has a link to that Bugthestard bombed website in the description really says a lot in and of itself. Now don't get me wrong though, it's great that he is now making videos criticizing Bugthestards, but it doesn't change the fact that he himself is a Bugthestard. The way he interacts with recent comments proves he hasn't completely changed in that regard. But, like Mr. Matty Plays, perhaps he's improved, or at least capable of improving. Only time will tell.
God damn it, YouTube. I fucking hate Fallout New Vegas.
You also seem to hate headphone users. Otherwise, you do a better job balancing your audio. Seriously, dude, your audio goes into the red.
God damn it, YouTube. I fucking hate Fallout New Vegas.
God damn it.
I'm going to try to balance the audio on the rest of your video, but I'm leaving this as it is as an example. As for you hating New Vegas, My response to that can be best summed up by Mr. Robert House when he said,
May there be a hell for you, a Tartarus, bleak, unending.
such a bleak, unending hell does exist for the Bugthestards. It is called Fallout 76. Well, pretty much any game made by Bethesda, really. I could have just as easily said Fallout 4. That's what happens when you have a game that lets you continue on past the ending. None of your choices really mattered in the end, and the game carries on with more settlements that need your help.
Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one.
On and on for eternity. As a Bugthestard, you might think that doesn't sound so bad, but imagine doing that over and over for eternity. The heat death of the universe is nothing compared to the amount of time Preston Garvey will be informing you that another settlement needs your help. That is the eternal damnation that awaits the Bugthestards.
Alright, so obviously I don't hate Fallout New Vegas.
Oh, I get it. It's just satire, parody, comedy, as you claim in the disclaimer you place in the video's description. Ha 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 ha. No. If this was satire, then why isn't it funny? And if it is satire, why do you try so hard to make your argument and defend it? And why do you heart and reply to comments which support you, but ignore or TLDR ones which do not? At no point that I've seen in your comments do you say, it's just a joke, it's just satire. You never say that in the comments under the video, which would be a logical thing to do considering how angry a lot of the comments are. Your disclaimer notwithstanding, no one seems to believe your story that this video is satirical in nature. My guess is this disclaimer is just a copy and paste of some sort of generic disclaimer you place in all of your videos. Maybe that disclaimer makes sense in the context of most of your videos, but not this one. No, you don't claim you hate something and then make arguments to justify that hate if it's just a joke.
But I'm really starting to turn on the community for Fallout New Vegas.
You've already made it clear you are against the Bugthestard community with the videos you've made critical of Fallout 76 and the Bugthestards who shill for it, as well as criticizing Bethesda's shitty practices. Is it really in your best interest to turn against and alienate the New Vegas community also? Between the New Vegas fans and the Bugthestards, what else is there in the Fallout community? If you're against both of these groups, then you're pretty much against everyone that has anything to do with Fallout. I get that you made this video in 2017 before Fallout 76 was even announced, but now it's been out for over a year, and you can clearly see it is a miserable failure. Yet you still persist in hearting pro-Bugthestard comments on your video. It makes no sense. Being against everyone is a position I can respect and admire, but do not forget what happened to Francisco Solano Lopez in the Paraguayan War. There is a lesson to be learned there. If you fight against everyone, you are guaranteed to lose. You must decide whether you stand with the Bugthestards or if you stand with the real fans of Fallout. If you stand against both, then you stand alone and you will not win. You will share the same fate as Francisco Solano Lopez.
These days, they're just like praising it like it's the ultimate game.
What do you mean, these days? Fallout New Vegas didn't just suddenly become great. It has always been great, ever since it was released.
You can't even talk about like other Fallouts.
You want to talk about other Fallouts, huh? How about we talk about Fallout 1 or Fallout 2? It doesn't seem like you want to talk about those games. I do not see any videos on your channel talking about Fallout 1 or Fallout 2. You know, 3 isn't the first number in the alphabet, right? There's a 1 and a 2, and then comes 3. But you don't talk about 1 or 2. Why is that? Why is that?
Without people like, you talk about Fallout 3, they're like, well, Fallout New Vegas was better. You talk about Fallout 4, Fallout New Vegas was better.
And it is also better than Fallout 76. What's your point? Have you ever stopped to wonder why New Vegas is better? I'll give you a hint.
Talk about the story of either of those games. Fallout New Vegas' story was better, which is not fucking true. To be honest, Fallout New Vegas' story is really lackluster, especially compared to 3 or 4. They have actually, I think 3's story is pretty good.
The 5th grade level story of a kid searching for their dad, and their dad makes all of the decisions, and the player is just a camera with legs who follows in their dad's footsteps. That's a great story to you, huh, Mr. TLDR? Someone responds to you with a comment that is a few paragraphs long, and you respond by saying TLDR. If your brain capacity is that low, where you can't even read a comment without saying TLDR, then what makes you think you are qualified to judge the quality of the story behind these games? You, sir, have the attention span of a cockroach.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
If you aren't Butch, this one guard, or the Overseer, your only meaningful choice is picking which weapon you mash them to death with. They're treated like the radroaches.
No wonder you would favor the story that is so banal and basic as Fallout 3. And Fallout 4 is the same story, just switching places of father and son. What is great about the story of Fallout 3? You look for your dad. Your dad is the hero of the story. He abandoned you to a likely death.
The main character is never the main character. Your dad is the main character for most of it, doing his own thing for his own reasons. All the game's truly big decisions, the decision to abandon his life's work and raise his son, the decision to leave and try again, the decision to kill himself in order to prevent the Enclave from taking over, you spend too much of this game watching your dad have a much more intricate story. So, I'm also here.
It's time.
God damn it, Janice! What did I tell you about walking into tables in the middle of a fucking cutscene? The real main characters are talking here!
Then he commits suicide. One would hope that with his death, the player would then be free to make their own decisions, but alas, no, because then Madison Lee immediately takes hold of the reins and bosses the player around.
But even when your dad dies, you're not left to pick up the pieces and make things work for yourself. Dr. Lee immediately takes over and starts giving you the orders for where to go next.
We've got to evacuate now. Don't wander off, we're going to need you.
Jeez, Madison, you don't have to be rude. I'm standing right here. This guy knows what's up. Or, he knows something. Are you alright, mate?
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Here she is convincing the Brotherhood to let you in.
Lions! I know you're in there! I know you can hear me! You open this goddamn door right now!
I guess I'm also here. I'm the player, but And then, when the time finally comes to take back the memorial and kick the Enclave out, who gives the triumphant speeches and leads the charge? Not you!
When we're done with this, everyone can have a nice cold glass of water on me.
Pride, move out!
Hey guys, how's it going? I literally can't even move. I have to watch this play out exactly how the developers want it to. The biggest effect you can have on the final mission is, if you bring an ally in with you, lions can't get past them and it takes longer for them to get out of the room.
Then you follow in the footsteps of a giant robot.
The final mission is you walking in a straight line, assisted by the Brotherhood as they kill everyone for you, and you're all following a robot as he kills everyone else. I spent a huge portion of this mission trying to score kills of my own, and I think I got about 3. Oh come on guys, no kill stealing. That's just rude. So, apart from a few brief flashes of brilliance like Vault 87, the entire main story the developers wrote for their game is total garbo, and barely even actually qualifies as a story. You're basically a camera with legs who watches a story happen at you.
You know, the entirety of Fallout 3 is spent following in someone else's footsteps. First it's your dad, then it's a giant robot. Then you're pressured to commit suicide, or get branded a coward if you don't. At no point in Fallout 3 does the story ever approach being anything close to being good. Emil Pagliarulo is an infamously bad writer. Just do a search on YouTube of his name and you'll find some videos talking about him and how terrible of a writer he is. These videos here by It's a Gundam and Zarek Zakharon are some good examples. Even Bethesda seemed to get how terrible Emil is at writing, because a couple years ago they removed him from his role of lead writer at the studio. They didn't fire him though, and apparently he was still involved in the writing of Fallout 76, or at least what little there is of it. Mr. Maddie Plays even made a video about it at the time. Maddie saw it as a sign the next BGS game would have a greater focus on role-playing. Oh, how wrong he was. Looking back in hindsight, the next BGS game was Fallout 76, and it is abysmal. I don't know what exactly removing Emil from being the lead writer accomplished, but it sure as hell didn't save 76 from being a shit show. Maybe his removal came too late to save that game, but maybe it will have an impact on the next Elder Scrolls or Starfield or whatever. Maybe 76 was Emil's last hurrah. We shall see. But Emil was only part of the problem. Todd is still the director of the studio.
Ring ring! Hello? What's that? I'm a bad game designer? What?
And as long as he is running things, I won't hold my breath on things at the studio getting any better. Now why is Emil's writing so terrible?
Fallout 3 pits you against Colonel Autumn.
You again.
Long story short, the characters and the world they live in are like paper mache. You ever heard Bethesda's games described as being wide as an ocean, but shallow as a mud puddle? That's because of Emil's 5th grade level writing, and Todd's "it just works" mentality. Look at any NPC in Fallout 3 and then compare them to an equivalent NPC in New Vegas, and tell me which has more depth and nuance. Colonel Autumn is the most pathetic end boss in any Fallout game to date. Not only is he pathetic in terms of how he goes down in a single shot, but also he's an objectively terribly written character who stands for nothing and turns on a dime. H. Bomber Guy covered this quite well in his Fallout 3 is Garbage, and Here's Why video. One example of why Emil is a hack is his reliance on Deus Ex Machina devices to force the 5th grade level plot in the way he wants it to, in a very contrived manner. When James commits suicide and expects to take Colonel Autumn out with him, Autumn pulls out a Deus Ex Machina syringe at the very last moment and injects himself with it. And it is never explained what this is or why he had it, but it allows him to survive, and it makes James's sacrifice meaningless. Another classic Emil Deus Ex Machina is the fact the radiation-immune companions flat out refuse to go into the purifier, even though it is of no harm to them to do so. They say some contrived bullshit about this being the player's destiny or whatever. It makes no logical sense. This is why Emil is a shit-tier writer and a hack who only became lead writer because he was high school friends with Todd Howard. Todd Howard himself is also a hack who just rode his bike to Bethesda Studios back in the early 90s and asked for a job, and they gave it to him. And for some reason, he eventually became the director of the studio, starting with Morrowind onward. I guess it's no coincidence that Morrowind marks the point where Bugthesda started to go downhill. Robert Altman, the crook who runs ZeniMax, does not care. Todd is able to make games that sell well because he makes games that cater to the lowest common denominator of players. Money matters more than quality. So as long as Todd's games sell millions of copies, nothing is going to be done about the banal writing and the vapid pop-a-mole gameplay. One of these days, I'm going to have to play this shitty Fallout 3 game again in order to get gameplay footage for when I do a response debunking Mattin's Fallout 3 is better than you think. I've played it once, about a decade ago, and I've never had any desire to play it since then. Mattin himself seems to be arguing in bad faith in his video where he defends Fallout 3, as was noted in this comment on Kretosis' video by J. Gray Dingler. Mattin bashes the hell out of New Vegas and uses mental gymnastics to kiss Bethesda's ass and make this video, which conveniently came out about a month before the Greenbrier event. Makes you wonder, don't it? Mattin knows Fallout 3 is shit, but he argues in bad faith to defend Fallout 3 anyway, because he's a shill for Bethesda. As J. Gray Dingler noted in his comment, Mattin barely ever touches Fallout 3, but he has done lots of videos on New Vegas. That says it all right there. He is a disingenuous liar who is kissing Bethesda's ass so he can get to private events and all the perks that come with being a brown-nosing shill. But in reality, he knows New Vegas is the superior game. That's the really sickening thing about his video. He threw a game he actually loves under the bus just to brown-nose Bethesda and get in their good grace. He doesn't believe the shit he says. If he did, he'd be playing Fallout 3 all the time and barely ever play New Vegas. But the reality is the opposite. Anyway, I digress. There's a great article on Eurogamer titled "The Murky Genius of Fallout New Vegas," which I'd highly recommend reading if you want a good explanation of what makes New Vegas a superior game to Fallout 3. Of course, you have the attention span of a cockroach, so that article is probably too TLDR for you. So rather than me reading the entire article to you, I will instead just read off a single paragraph which sums it up quite well. That's New Vegas's grittier air taken in one intoxicating breath. It seemed so much more mature because of its plausibility. New Vegas presented a murky ideological war between balanced factions rather than a comic book fight between devils and angels. Fallout 3 pitted futuristic techno-knights of justice and Liberty Prime, a giant walking mech, against a shadowy and implausibly well-equipped techno-elite hell-bent on world domination. New Vegas had a deeply flawed, militaristic republic against revivalist fascists, with local power player machinations slicing up the middle. Fallout 3 was Star Wars. New Vegas was Afghanistan. That final sentence says it all. Fallout 3 was Star Wars. New Vegas was Afghanistan. Think about that.
A lot of people hate on it. Fallout 4 story was obviously good in theory.
In theory, huh? Would you care to elaborate on this theory in detail? No, I already explained how Bethesda sacked Emil from his position of lead writer. Watch Maddie's video about it, which I already mentioned. The thing is, Fallout 4 is set in Boston, and Emil grew up in Boston. If there's one thing he should know, it is Boston. This was his best chance to redeem himself as a writer, but he blew it. If he couldn't pull off great writing in a setting he knows so intimately well, then what good is he? As for what is wrong with Fallout 4's story, much like Fallout 3, a lot of it has to do with the fact that it is on rails. Players have little to no say in the matter. Finding Sean is mandatory in order to progress. Unlike with Benny in New Vegas, you have no choice not to track down your son, just as you are forced to do the same with James in Fallout 3. You are not in control of your own character. There is an overwhelming preponderance of essential characters in Fallout 4 which cannot be killed, because killing them would conflict with the garbage story playing out exactly as Emil wrote it. Fallout 3 has the exact same problem. New Vegas, on the other hand, has no essential characters except for a few exceptions. Number 1, children. They are not killable for political correctness reasons, which is out of Obsidian's hands. It was possible to kill children in the original Fallout and Fallout 2, and doing so gave you a severe reputation penalty which branded you as a child killer, and it made people hate you in dialogue. It also caused bounty hunters to appear during random encounters that came after you. In fact, I'm quite sure the bounty hunters in Fallout 3 were based off those in the originals, even though Fallout 3 stripped out the ability to kill children. Though even in the Interplay era, the killing of children was controversial, and this was removed in a later patch, which caused the game to be broken in some respects. Users can, of course, remove that and make children killable again, but from Fallout 3 onwards, children are no longer killable. If Obsidian were able to allow children to be killed in New Vegas, they probably would. I base this on the fact they allowed it in the originals when they were known as Black Isle. And if you play some of their other recent games, like the South Park game they made, or Tyranny, you will see they are a very edgy studio when it comes to that sort of thing. As a matter of fact, in Tyranny, you are given the option of murdering an infant. Not just a child, but an actual baby infant. You can murder that infant, and it is one of the few games I am aware of which allows players to do such a thing. That's why Obsidian is a great studio. Not because killing infants is great, but because players should be in full control of their character's actions, and that includes being able to murder anyone the player chooses. But no, children are not killable in New Vegas. This was due to political correctness that came from Bethesda breathing down Obsidian's necks as they developed the game. Obsidian did not have 100% total freedom on development. Bethesda loomed over them and overrode some of the things they wanted to do, such as allowing players to be able to play as ghouls or mutants, in addition to a human courier. Obsidian wanted to allow this, but Bethesda stepped in and said, "Nuh-uh." So, we were denied that. The inadequate 18-month development time is another thing Bethesda decreed and forced on Obsidian. And the reason why is because Bethesda did not want New Vegas coming out the same year as Skyrim. So that meant the 2010 release was mandatory, which meant the game had only 18 months of development, even though it definitely could have benefited from a year or two more. And when people talk about New Vegas having bugs, that's why. It's not Obsidian's fault. Plus, every game Bugthesda has made is also buggy as hell. People who criticize New Vegas for its bugs, yet think that Fallout 3 or Fallout 4 did not likewise have a billion bugs, is delusional and insane. But anyway, children are not killable in New Vegas for political correctness reasons, which were out of Obsidian's hands. The other non-killable NPCs in New Vegas are: number 2, Yesman. Though technically you can kill the Securitron that happens to host him at any given moment. But Yesman is an AI program, and he can implant himself in a new Securitron body to replace the one you destroyed. That being said, there actually is a way that you can keep Yesman from reappearing once and for all. Kill him with a crit from an energy weapon. This will turn the Securitron into either an ash pile or a goo pile, and this pile never disappears from the game, and likewise, Yesman never respawns. So if you do want to kill Yesman for good, technically you can do it with this method, but doing so makes the game uncompletable once you've locked yourself into the Yesman path. Number 3, Vendortron. You cannot kill Vendortron because he is encapsulated inside of the indestructible store constructed around him. Just as the immortal Yesman provides players with a failsafe to prevent them from being locked out of completing the game, except for turning him into a goo pile or ash pile, of course, so too does Vendortron provide players with a failsafe merchant. You can kill every other merchant in the game. I think the unnamed traveling merchants do respawn after some time, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I do know that in Fallout 3, the traveling merchants in that game are pretty much fucked. You can invest into them to help them out, but it can only help so much. And when you add in the Broken Steel add-on, that guarantees they are fucked. Because then, top-tier DLC enemies, like albino rad scorpions, and feral ghoul reavers start to spawn in and fuck those merchants over. It's a pretty good example of how Fallout 3's world design is unbalanced shit and doesn't feel like a plausible, believable world at all. But that's kind of off scope of the topic at hand. Number 4, Festus. Yeah, Festus is unkillable, though from the looks of him, it appears that someone tried. I also think it's a bit debatable as to whether Festus counts as being alive or an NPC. You can ask him questions and play caravan with him, so I'm going to say that he is an NPC, but certainly not a typical one. And that's pretty much it. Children and 3 robots are the only characters that cannot be killed in New Vegas. Oh, and I guess Mr. New Vegas too. But then again, you never actually encounter him, so I guess that's another topic for debate. And I bring this up because I do feel that New Vegas deserves credit for making nearly every character killable. And you cannot say the same about Fallout 3 or Fallout 4. You can use the BB gun James gives you at your birthday party to shoot him until he's unconscious, but you cannot kill him. And in Fallout 4, you cannot kill Sean. James and Sean are the alpha chads of their respective games, and your character in those games is the beta virgin who follows in their footsteps. You play Robin to their Batman. New Vegas, on the other hand, treats the player like an alpha and the hero. I don't know about you, but if I'm going to be spending $60 for a game, I damn well better be the hero of it. I didn't pay $60 for Oblivion just so I could be the hero of Kvatch. I didn't buy a game called Kvatch. I bought a game called Oblivion. So why is some guy voiced by Sean Bean the hero of the game and not me? That's just another reason why, when people called Fallout 3 Oblivion with guns, it is very
apt.
Both games are shallow as a mud puddle, and the player character is, I guess, what one might call a cuck, who is told what to do and follow someone else around. And Oblivion came out 2 years before Fallout 3. So fans of original Fallout had 2 years ahead of time to predict and fear that Fallout 3 would be Oblivion with guns, rather than a real Fallout game. And sure enough, that's exactly how it turned out to be. Those fears were justified. But anyway, I think a lot can be said about the personality of people based on whether they like Bugthestards games or whether they like RPGs like Fallout New Vegas that lets them make their own choices. Some people like to be in control. Others like to be bossed around by a Chinese woman.
We've got to evacuate now. Don't wander off. We're going to need you.
I can tell you fall into the latter category, Dashing David. Ironically, while Fallout 4 and Fallout 3 have a large number of essential NPCs that can't be killed, there are also a vast number of NPCs which you have no choice not to kill. H-Bomb covered quite well how Vault 101 security guards are treated no different than rad roaches. You cannot talk them down. You have no choice but to either kill them, run away from them, or die. But this same flawed game design goes into Fallout 4 also. You have no choice not to kill Kellogg. This is forced on you, And the one who forces this is none other than the character you're, quote, controlling. Either Nate or Nora. The word controlling needs to be in quotations, as you have only nominal control when it comes to what Nate and Nora do or say. The dialogue in Fallout 4 is notoriously bad and is just 4 different ways of saying yes. That also goes for the confrontation with Kellogg. You have 4 choices on what to say, but all 4 choices initiate combat with him. It even seems like Kellogg isn't keen on fighting, and that he could be talked down. Yet the game gives you no option to do that. What is the deal with the Brotherhood of Steel being a complete 180 of what they were in Fallout 3? Wasn't Fallout 3 supposed to be about fighting the good fight, or whatever crap 3Dog calls it? Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 3 are objective, black and white, good guys, with no nuance whatsoever. You are railroaded to side with them whether you want to or not. But the game makes it clear that they are the good guys. You do have the choice of putting in the Enclave shit into the purifier and poison all the mutants or whatever. This is what President Eden wants to happen. But Colonel Autumn is against it. It is never explained what Colonel Autumn's goals and motives are. He wants the purifier, but he's against the genocide that Eden advocates. So why would it be such a terrible thing for him to have the purifier rather than the Brotherhood of Steel? You see, that's another reason why Emil is a lousy writer. If you can't articulate what the main adversary's motives and goals are, then you've failed as a writer. Not just with Autumn, but also Alistair Tenpenny, who wants to blow up Megaton, but there's no justifiable reason for it. Other than the lulz, I guess. The bad guys in these games seem to be bad just for the sake of being bad, and the good guys are good just for the sake of being good. No nuance whatsoever. But in Fallout 4, you can see Bethesda backpedaling on the Brotherhood of Steel from how they depicted them in Fallout 3. The Brotherhood of Steel were never the objective good guys in the classic Fallouts. They opposed the Master's army, but not because they were goody two-shoes that wanted to help the people of the Wasteland. So when Bethesda wrote them as we see them in Fallout 3, they got a lot of criticism from real Fallout fans. In Fallout 4, the Brotherhood of Steel are mutant-hating fascists. They became exactly what they fought against in Fallout 3. Bethesda changed them in Fallout 3 to be good guys, because Bethesda doesn't understand nuance. As pointed out in the article I cited, Fallout 3 is about angels versus demons. There's only 2 factions, and there is 0 nuance to them. Fallout 4 made all of the events of Fallout 3 meaningless. Why fight to stop the Enclave from taking the Purifier when the Brotherhood of Steel is or will become identical to the Enclave anyway? That would be like assassinating Adolf Hitler and then having Heinrich Himmler take his place. What exactly did you gain or accomplish from that? With the Brotherhood of Steel being as they are in Fallout 4, they would agree wholeheartedly with President Eden's agenda of genociding the mutants. James' suicide was pointless to begin with, but that and his entire life's work and all the sacrifices of everyone in the Capital Wasteland in fighting against the Enclave was completely and utterly pointless. You got rid of Hitler, but installed Himmler in his place. Was that worth fighting for? As bad as Fallout 3 was to begin with, Fallout 4 made it even worse by retroactively making the whole conflict pointless. If the Brotherhood are somehow able to obtain Eden's FEV poison, is there any doubt that they would use it in the Purifier, being as they now are in Fallout 4? Again, Colonel Autumn opposed Eden's genocide. Why not just let him win? Worst case scenario, it isn't going to be any worse than how it turned out in Fallout 4 anyway. And if everyone in the Capital Wasteland died, well, who cares? The place is a shithole. Maybe Tenpenny was right for wanting to genocide Megaton, because Tenpenny understood what a vapid Popamole world he was trapped in, just like that girl in the Tranquility Lane simulation. If I found myself trapped in a Bugthestard world, I'd want to nuke it also. Put the damn thing out of its misery. Who wants to live in a world with bad writing? You know, I'd actually respect Bugthesda more if they had some spine and stuck to their guns. They let the fan base dictate to them what to do when they are supposed to be the owners and masters of the franchise now, right? They bought it, so they should rub that fact in and do whatever retarded bullshit they do and tell the fans to go fuck themselves. That's what they're doing anyway, but they try to be more subtle about it. I say they should be more overt that they are the dictators of the Fallout franchise. They took someone else's work, tore it to shreds, and then flushed it down the toilet. Then they go and backpedal on one thing due to criticism. Instead of doing that, they should have doubled down and turned the Brotherhood of Steel into literal clowns. I mean, swap out their power armor with clown costumes. That's what this franchise has become at this point. It's a clown game. You think that's hyperbolic? Just look at the kid in the fridge quest. What little integrity the game still had left was completely erased with that kid in the fridge bullshit. Under Bugthesda's incompetence, the Fallout franchise has turned into a clown game. That is great writing to you?
It just didn't work for a Fallout game.
Would it work for any game? Why should the gaming community tolerate bad writing? See, this is the reason why video games are not as respected as other mediums. You say Fallout 4's bad writing doesn't work for a Fallout game, but you think it would be fine for some other game. Why? Why should we accept bad writing for any game, whether it be Fallout or anything else for that matter? I'm reminded of an angry rant on a channel called Alpha Omega Sin that came out back in 2012.
And these motherfucks, these sacks of fuck, these piles of fuck, literally said Black Ops?
This dude was pissed off because Call of Duty Black Ops was voted to have the best ending of a video game. The thing is, Black Ops actually did have a great story. I know people are inclined to write a game like that off because those sorts of games are mainly known for the online multiplayer. In fact, I understand the most recent Call of Duty doesn't even have a single-player campaign at all. And I can't particularly say I would agree that Black Ops had the best writing of any video game ever made, especially because I have not played every video game ever made. Far from it. But what I can say, though, is that Black Ops did have some great writing, and maybe that great writing was wasted on the vast majority of its audience, who were likely children who just wanted to go pew 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 at other people in online multiplayer and yell racial slurs and all that other stuff which Call of Duty is known for. But regardless of who or what the majority of that game's audience is, all I'm saying is that Black Ops did have a great story. But Fallout 4 did not. Fallout 4 did have some improved gunplay over Fallout 3, but the story was shit. There's no excuse for this from a multi-billion-dollar corporation with deep pockets like ZeniMax has. The thing is, you don't even need to be a multi-billion-dollar corporation for your games to have great writing. Obsidian has been treading water financially for their entire history, yet their games have all consistently had great writing. If a financially struggling developer could have great writing in their games, then why couldn't Bethesda? But I guess the answer to that question is the same as the answer to the question of why is Bethesda using the same Gamebryo engine for all of their games since 2001? Or why, until Fallout 4, would they only hire a handful of voice actors and reuse those few voice actors for hundreds of NPCs?
I heard that thieves broke into the Arcane University, the Imperial Legion compound, and the temple all on the same night. Wait a minute, let me do that one again. I heard that thieves broke into the Arcane University, the Imperial Legion compound, and the temple all on the same night. Take care.
The answer is they just don't give a fuck. Their games sell, and that's all they care about. They have plenty of brain-dead human cattle that keep buying their shit regardless of how bad it is. So ZeniMax just don't give a damn. Take this comment I found on Kretosis' video, for instance. The thing that this imbecile does not understand is that good gameplay and good writing are not mutually exclusive. A game can have both or either. Fallout 3 has neither one. If Fallout 3's terrible writing were the only bad thing about it, then I guess it could be redeemed in some sense, but the gameplay just isn't any good either. In a nutshell, Fallout 3's gameplay consists of marching in a straight line towards a quest marker to retrieve a MacGuffin and pop-a-mole every random enemy that appears along the way. This Bugthestard praises the pop-a-mole gameplay of enemies popping up and then pop 'em and then rinse and repeat. And the way you are meant to pop enemies is in vats, where the enemies are frozen in place and you are given unfair and enormous buffs like shooting fish in a barrel. Only Bugthestards consider this to be great gameplay. Now, one could try to argue that VATS is optional, but most of the guns in Fallout 3 lack functioning iron sights. The game was not intended to have been played out of VATS, and besides that, enemies in this game are just bullet sponges that do nothing more than rush at the player. Increasing the game's difficulty only increases the bullet sponginess of the enemies. It doesn't make them any smarter or challenging, other than the amount of ammo and time it takes you to deal with them. And to be fair, New Vegas suffers much of the same issues with the combat. But New Vegas is somewhat better because VATS has been drastically nerfed from what it was in Fallout 3. Also, the guns now have iron sights, so you can actually aim the damn thing. But gameplay is what it is. To Fallout 4's credit, I will say the gunplay has massively improved, thanks to id Software getting involved in the development and putting their own expertise to work. Fallout 4 deserves credit for that much at least. But it is id Software who deserves credit for making this happen, not Bethesda. But regardless of who did it, it is something Fallout 4 improved on. However, Fallout 4 was a step back from New Vegas in terms of ammo reloading benches and the myriad of ammo types. New Vegas still got that better than Fallout 4, and Fallout 4 was a step backwards in that respect. But gunplay is only one aspect of the gameplay. Combat isn't all there is to it. The choice and consequence aspect also plays a big role. Otherwise, we'd all just be playing Call of Duty. But whether we play Call of Duty or Fallout or anything else, there's no excuse for a game having bad writing. This comment left by a Bugthestard on Kretosis' video is moronic, not only because it is based on the flawed argument that fun and great writing are mutually exclusive, but also because the writing does have an impact on how fun a game can be. Fallout 3 has garbage gameplay regardless of the writing, for reasons I already explained, but the bad writing detracts from this further. Putting a gun to someone's head and blowing their brains out may be fun if you're a psychopath, but what is even more fun is if you legitimately hate that person. Then killing them becomes far more satisfying and rewarding. New Vegas does a great job with the various NPCs that, depending on your worldview, you develop an acute hatred for, such as Caesar or Kaiser, whom you hear about well in advance of meeting him from what is told to you by Boone and others in the wasteland of what a terrible tyrant he is, and the terrible things he and his men have done. You even witness it firsthand when you pass by Nipton and Searchlight and see the atrocities Caesar and his men have committed, as well as the slavery of Boone's wife and the powder gangers that were captured in Nipton, and so on and so forth. Anton Chekhov is reputed to have once said, quote, "Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass." New Vegas doesn't tell you that the Legion are evil. It shows it to you. This is a technique good writers strive for. It is called show, don't tell. But that's not to say that the Legion are unnuanced, objective, black and white bad guys. In regards to the slavery, sure, Boone's wife and many others do not deserve that fate, but few would argue that the powder gangers don't deserve that. Many of them freely admit to being rapists and murderers, and you can even see some of their handiwork at the site of Ringo's caravan and what they've done to it. The powder gangers are bad people. The NCR is using them as chain gangs to rebuild the railroad. So I do not think many tears were shed by the fate of the powder gangers that were hauled off as slaves by the Legion. It's not too different than how they were treated by the NCR. But the NCR had a problem with discipline to keep the powder gangers in control. NCR was too lax, and the powder gangers took over the prison and wreaked havoc on the surrounding area. Innocent people were killed and brutalized. The same is true with the Fiends, which were another NCR creation due to the NCR's poor discipline. If there is one good thing that can be said about the Legion, it's that they are able to maintain law and order in the territory that they control. You don't actually get to see what Legion territory is like, as that was cut from the game due to the time constraints. But what we hear anecdotally from Dale Barton, and even grudgingly from Cass, it is that Legion territory is safer to travel in, because the Legion don't tolerate any shit from powder gangers, fiends, and so on and so forth. Even Tabitha from Black Mountain expresses fear at the battle cattle in her radio broadcasts.
You, Tabitha, I'm here with best friend Tabitha, who has a message for all the dum-dums out there.
It has come to my attention that some of you dum-dums took me a little too seriously in the past when I warned you about the battle cattle. While battle cattle are indeed a dangerous foe, they are one that should be fought ferociously. Recently, I've heard about several incidents where some of you have been running away from a fight where battle cattle were involved. This is not acceptable! No self-respecting soldier of Utopia should ever be seen running like a scared little human! I don't even know why I try. It's not like the dum-dums are even going to understand this!
You heard her, Utopia. Beware the battle cattle, but don't fear the battle cattle. More after this.
Battle cattle, of course, being a reference to the Legion's flag with the bull. We don't have a whole lot to go on for what life is like for ordinary civilians in Legion territory, but from what little we do know, it seems obvious that the Legion do a far better job of keeping their shit together and maintaining law and order. Of course, this does come at the cost of the Legion being authoritarian, misogynistic, and practicers of slavery. The Legion are all of these things, but at least the trains in Legion territory run on time. And the reason why those trains run on time is because the chain gangs the Legion use to build and repair those railroads aren't rising up and taking over like the powder gangers do at NCR-CF. Unlike the NCR, anyone who opposes the Legion is crucified, and they are left as a reminder and a warning that those who rebel against the Legion will share the same fate. So that's why the trains run on time. And some might argue that this fact makes the Legion better able to deal with the challenges of the post-apocalyptic wasteland and rebuild than the NCR is. The NCR is having all sorts of problems maintaining order and security in the territory it controls. It is dangerous to travel the roads in NCR-controlled territory, as we see time and time again. All I'm saying is there are pros and cons to the Legion, just as there are to the other factions. It depends on your worldview whether those pros outweigh the cons, but I will say that we can look to history at the real Roman Empire, which the Legion is based on, and see that what Edward Sallow is trying to achieve does have historical precedent. It might be brutal and oppressive and this and that, but at least it just works.
All of this just works. All of this just works. All of this just works. All of this just works.
But, of course, this is getting off topic to the original point, which is that great writing can make you hate a character or a faction, and that hatred that the writing makes you feel towards that character or faction makes it much more satisfying and rewarding to fight against them. It is indeed a factor towards how fun a game is. If you are apathetic towards the enemy you are fighting, or towards your allies whom you are fighting with, then is it as fun to play that game when you're not really feeling it? Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 force the player in a certain direction. You are forced to side with the Brotherhood of Steel. You are forced to find your dad. You are forced to find your son. You are forced to kill Kellogg. You are forced to follow in the footsteps of a giant robot. You are forced to obey the orders of a Chinese woman. All of these and more are forced on you. If you feel personally invested in that, then maybe you might find some enjoyment in it. But I have my own moral compass, and I do not need nor want one forced on me arbitrarily. Which is why the karma mechanic is shit, by the way. I do not need nor want someone to tell me what the good fight is. I can decide for myself what the good fight is. Fallout New Vegas gives me the freedom to decide what the good fight is, and I can make that decision. Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 force it on you. You are forced to fight what Todd and Emil have decreed is the good fight. Sometimes they might allow you to deviate from that path slightly, but doing so brands you as evil. Many would argue Caesar and the Legion are evil, but the game does not tell you that you are evil for siding with them. Caesar himself is classified as a neutral karma character in the game. Though, to be fair, Vulpes and Linnaeus are classified as evil. But you know who else is evil? Colonel Moore. She has done evil things on par with Linnaeus and Vulpes. You can say her ends justify the means, but you could say the exact same thing about the Legion. You could say that slavery is a necessary evil to rebuild in the post-apocalyptic world. I personally do not agree with that. I think that in a universe full of robots, you could just use the robots to do the work even more efficiently than humans anyway. But the Legion are against that sort of technology, as they believe it weakens the human race. And maybe they are right. The great thing about New Vegas is that the player alone gets to make that determination. You can't really say the same thing about the Enclave in Fallout 3, can you? Even Fallout 1 allowed you to join the Master's army and become a super mutant. The Master believed what he was doing was right. For that matter, so did Hitler. So does Edward Sallow. Very few people believe themselves to be evil. It depends on what your worldview happens to be. That's the problem with saying the Legion or the Enclave are evil. They believe that what they are doing is right. Whether it actually is or not is debatable, but so too is the NCR and their conquest of Nevada, regardless of the wishes of the people who live in Nevada. And it isn't just who we fight that matters, but who we are fighting for. In Fallout 4, we are forced to act like we care about Sean and our spouse who was murdered by Kellogg. But, as Mr. Caption noted in his Fallout 4 review, we spend too little time to get attached to either of these characters before they are ripped away from us.
I don't know who exactly at Bethesda thought that introducing our spouse as a character we're supposed to love and care for also thought that killing them 11 minutes into the game, far before we've had even remotely enough time to get attached to them, was a good idea, but please let me confirm for you that it is not. It's idiotic to take a character of such an important role to our character and treat them like a one-off who gets 4 lines of dialogue and then dies 5 minutes into the game. In fact, our spouse is the first person we actively see die in the game. That's how little of the story they're a part of.
Nate or Nora obviously would care, because this is their son and their spouse. But that's them. Why should we, the player, care? You cannot not care about them. The game forces you to care. You are forced to avenge your spouse's murder with 4 dialogue options, all of which initiate combat with Kellogg. If you wanted to forgive Kellogg or be a pacifist, too bad. You are not in control of your character. Todd and Emil are in control of your character.
After we create our character's face, we get into the part of the game where we're not allowed to create anything else about them, namely their story. For some awful, completely pointless reason, Bethesda seems to have it in their heads that the protagonists of the Fallout franchise should not, in fact, be characters with stories fully created by the player. allowing the consumers of this product to exercise their creative muscles and write their own story, which gives them an incomparable sense of freedom and understanding of who they want to play going forward. In this game series, lauded and applauded and advertised.
Like the rest of the game, this is about making it your own experience.
Later in the story, you have unkillable companions forced on you, such as Dogmeat. You cannot not have Dogmeat's help, nor can you kill him. And the same goes for various other companions, like Nick Valentine. These companions are forced on you against your will. In my day, we had a term for forcing companionship on someone. It's called rape. Fallout 4 rapes the player by forcing companionship on them, whether that companionship is wanted or not.
New Vegas' story is just, I got shot in the head, let me find out why, platinum chip, big fight at the end of the game. That's the story for Fallout New Vegas.
No. Getting shot in the head is not the story for New Vegas. It is the prologue of the story of your character, but your character is a character in a world. The game is called Fallout New Vegas. It is not called Fallout Courier 6. Your character has a profound impact on how the story of New Vegas plays out, but it is a story with many actors, and each play their part in shaping that story. Benny, of course, is one such character. He acts in his own self-interest and shoots the courier because he wants the platinum chip so that he can upgrade the Securitron army at Caesar's fort and use said army to take control. Revenge can be the player's motive for hunting Benny down, but it is entirely optional. Not only is it optional to kill Benny, but so too is it optional to track him down and confront him at all. At least with the NCR path, anyway. After you enter and leave the Lucky 38 for the first time, you are presented with a letter from Ambassador Crocker inviting you to meet with him. This initiates the NCR questline. You do not have to enter the Tops Casino and do anything with Benny, and you can finish the game without ever doing or saying a thing to him. NCR couldn't care less about Benny or the Platinum Chip, and it is completely irrelevant to their questline. The three other factions are interested in the Platinum Chip for one reason or another. Yesman and House want the Platinum Chip to upgrade the Securitron army. Caesar, being against such advanced technology, wants to see it all destroyed, because he doesn't want anyone to be able to use it, as he believes humanity's reliance on such advanced technology weakens the human race. So for these three factions, it is mandatory to confront Benny one way or another, because he has the Platinum Chip. And I should also mention that there is a fifth faction in the game, in the form of Elijah in the Dead Money DLC. You can side with Elijah at the end of the DLC, and that is a fifth potential ending for the game. And most people overlook and don't recognize that. But it is nevertheless an option, so I thought I would mention it. But in the base game, you have 4 options. 3 of them do require confronting Benny. Of those 3, only Caesar insists that you exact your revenge on him. You are given the option of killing Benny in the tent while he is tied up, fighting him to the death in the arena, or crucifying him. You can also give him a stealth boy and a bobby pin and allow him to sneak out of Caesar's tent, but doing so makes the Legion hostile towards you. So, to appease Caesar, you have no choice but to kill Benny. You can either decide to kill him or kill him slowly. But either way, Caesar insists that he die, and you must make that decision. This does mean that a pacifist playstyle is impossible when going down the Legion path. But it goes without saying that if you've sided with the Legion, you've pretty much renounced pacifism regardless. Yesman and House don't care what you do about Benny. They only want the platinum chip back. Yesman is programmed to agree with whatever anyone says to him. So whether you kill Benny or spare him, Yesman has no choice but to agree with you that it was the right decision. You can even blow up the Securitron army at the fort while going down the Yesman path. The Yesman ending is still possible while doing this, but it becomes more difficult, and Yesman is noticeably irritated by you having done this, and he never ceases to express irritation over it for the remainder of the game. But the Yesman path is still possible regardless. However, if you blow up the Securitrons, it means you've burned your bridges with Mr. House. He will not forgive you if you do this. He even makes sure to explicitly tell you not to do this on a computer terminal at the fort. Yesman and House care a great deal about the platinum chip, and understandably so, but they don't care what you do about Benny. House says he leaves what to do about Benny to your discretion. You can kill Benny or spare him. Delivery of the platinum chip is non-negotiable, but killing or sparing Benny is left to the player's sole discretion. Truth be told, House actually considers killing Benny to be a repugnant action if the courier does this. If you've killed Benny and you go back to House to tell him about it, he will react with disgust, and he will say that he doesn't want to hear about your primate triumph.
Sorry to deny you a moment of primate triumph, but you'll have to go elsewhere to sound your barbaric yawp.
This is a little surprising, as Mr. House was stabbed in the back by Benny, so it would seem that he would have about as much reason to want revenge as the courier, and yet he does not. This proves that Robert House is a very reasonable and logical man, which is why I am proud to say that he was my choice in my first playthrough of the game. Anyway, the point is that hunting down and killing Benny is not the story of New Vegas. Only a Bugthestard would come to the conclusion that this is what New Vegas is about. As I've pointed out, and will reiterate once more, the game can be played from beginning to end with the NCR path without ever finding or interacting with Benny in any way whatsoever. Not only do you not have to kill him, but you do not have to even find him at all. So how the fuck can finding Benny be the story of New Vegas, when the game can be completed without ever finding him? Granted, this is only true with the NCR path. You do have to find him in the other paths, but really, it's not so much Benny which you need to track down, but rather it's the platinum chip which he carries. It is the platinum chip Benny carries rather than Benny himself, which is the Uber MacGuffin of Act 1. And keep in mind that this is just in Act 1. After finding the platinum chip and doing the things at the fort, it then becomes just as superfluous as Benny himself. Neither Benny nor the chip he carries is the objective of the entire game. It is only the objective of Act 1, and even then, it's still optional if you go the NCR route. Many a True Nerd used the same bullshit argument in his Fallout 3 is better than you think video. Many a True Nerd acts smug and thinks he knows what he's talking about, but he doesn't. He's wrong for saying the story is about finding Benny, just as you are wrong for making the same claim, Dashing David. He also says it's impossible to get past the Cazadors north of Goodsprings at the start of the game. Bullshit. If you're a competent player and you are able to figure out the problem solving, there's a number of ways to get past them. It is not an insurmountable barrier. But I suppose the key word there is problem solving. Matten's target audience for that video is Bugthestards, and expecting those quest marker lemmings to do any amount of problem solving is probably asking too much of them. But not for me. I am able to do things Matten says are impossible. Just look at my Lonesome Road Level 1 challenge series, where I do things which he cannot, and which he has even said in his own series are impossible, thus proving that I am superior and more knowledgeable at the game than he is. I am able to do what he considers to be impossible. I can get past those cazadors, which are impossible to him. And I can also complete the game without ever interacting with Benny in any way. So how the fuck is the game about hunting down Benny when doing so is completely optional? Explain that. As I said, you are a character in a world. You can shape the events in that world by your actions, but the world doesn't revolve around you. You are not the Dragonborn. People in the game don't just automatically kiss your ass just because you're the player character. Some may come to respect you, but you have to earn that respect. One such character is Edward Sallow, aka Caesar, aka Kaiser. Even if you've gained infamy with the Legion, he will issue a one-time pardon of those crimes and invites you to his fort. Like many others in the Wasteland, I'm sure he has heard of the courier who was shot in the head and then proceeded to track down the man responsible. When you set your mind to it, you get things done, and Caesar respects that.
You do know why I wanted to meet you, right? A man nearly kills you, so you track him across the breadth of the Mojave? You assassinate the head of the chairman in his own casino and get away with it? When you set your mind to something, you get results. I like that. The question is, are you ready to get started?
In almost any other game, this sort of feat wouldn't even be acknowledged. But that is why New Vegas is genius and has some of the best storytelling of any game ever made. You say that the story of New Vegas is getting shot in the head, but that is only the prologue, and only the prologue of the Courier specifically. The prologue of New Vegas as a whole is also given in the opening narration by Ron Perlman.
War. War never changes. When atomic fire consumed the earth, those who survived did so in great underground vaults. When they opened, their inhabitants set out across the ruins of the old world to build new societies, establishing villages, forming tribes. As decades passed, what had been the American Southwest united beneath the flag of the new California Republic, dedicated to old world values of democracy and the rule of law. As the Republic grew, so did its needs. Scouts spread east, seeking territory and wealth in the dry and merciless expanse of the Mojave Desert. They returned with tales of a city untouched by the warheads that had scorched the rest of the world, and a great wall spanning the Colorado River. The NCR mobilized its army and sent it east to occupy Hoover Dam and restore it to working condition. But across the Colorado, another society had arisen under a different flag. A vast army of slaves forged from the conquest of 86 tribes, Caesar's Legion. 4 years have passed since the Republic held the dam, just barely, against the Legion's onslaught. the Legion did not retreat. Across the river, it gathers strength. Campfires burn, training drums beat. Through it all, the New Vegas Strip has stayed open for business, under the control of its mysterious overseer, Mr. House, and his army of rehabilitated tribals and police robots. You are a courier, hired by the Mojave Express to deliver a package to the New Vegas Strip. What seemed like a simple delivery job has taken a turn for the worse.
Citing this opening prologue narration, Many A True Shill started lying and talking shit in bad faith, as he does throughout his shitty-ass video. Here is what Kretosis had to say on the matter.
Basically, his point here is that in these games, you start on a small personal journey and learn about bigger faction and conflicts as they become relevant to you. He then says New Vegas is the weakest in this regard. It goes on to explain how simple the Ron Perlman intros were for Fallout 1 and 3. But for New Vegas, it goes into great detail about the NCR, the Legion, House. Matt didn't even go so far as to talk rapidly here, more so than normal as an exaggeration, to make it sound like an overwhelming amount of information, and just look at all this bullshit the game is flooding you with.
But let's just quickly go over the Ron Perlman introductions. You see, in Fallout 3, Ron lets you know there's been a nuclear war, some people survived it thanks to the vaults, and that's where you'll be starting out, which is pretty much the same intro as in Fallout 1. In New Vegas, before you get to play the game at all, Ron lets you know there was a big nuclear war, but that was ages ago, and now the NCR is the largest regional power in the Southwest, but their resources are a bit strange, so they sent scouts east, and they found Hoover Dam in New Vegas, so they sent their army there to fix it, but there was this other army called Caesar's Legion. They also wanted the dam, so there was this massive battle, but that was a few years ago, and the NCR won, but it was close, so the NCR have the dam now, but the Legion is still nearby, and they're totally going to attack it again. Also, New Vegas is still all Las Vegas-y, and there's this bloke called Mr. House. He runs things there, and he's got lots of robots working for him, and you're a courier, and you're delivering something to the Strip, but that's gone wrong, and then we go straight into another cutscene where we meet Benny and the Khan faction and the hint of a conspiracy, and then we get to play the game.
Here's the history of the world, and this is what the NCR is, and this is what they're doing, and here's what the Legion is, and what they're doing, and here's Mr. House, and I'd like to remind people, this is the same guy who called me an angry negative ranter who makes hyperbolic arguments because I have the audacity to criticize him. And yet here he is, being equally hyperbolic as he claims I am, with the setup of the game, and being reductive about the story in the game's intro, which is meant to set up the story. Then he says the dumbest line yet.
And I'm sorry, but we didn't need any of that information. That is just a massive exposition dump. That is pure telling, not showing. And I'm utterly baffled that managed to make it into the final game, because we don't need any of it. The information we need to begin New Vegas is, you're a courier, Benny robbed you, he's got a distinctive look so we can ask after him, go find him. All the other information is irrelevant. The second town you find is held by the NCR. They could very easily have given you a quick NCR history lesson.
I also shared my own thoughts on the matter in a comment I left on Kretosis' video, adding some further points I felt that Kretosis could have handled a bit better, though he was mostly spot on. As I noted in my comment, the Ron Perlman narration can be skipped with just a single button press if the amount of time it takes is such an issue. Too bad the same can't be said about Fallout 3's opening, where literally 19 years are spent growing up inside of a vault as the player grows from literal birth to a 19-year-old. By the way, isn't 18 considered an adult? Did something change in the post-apocalyptic world that made it so that 19 is still considered a kid and living under your parents' roof and thumb? H-Bomb was right in his criticism of Fallout 3's unskippable 2-hour-long vault intro. It is boring and completely unnecessary. Too bad it can't be skipped with a button press like the Ron Perlman intro of New Vegas, right? This opening prologue is to fill the player in on the basic information of the world. It doesn't go into extreme detail but it provides all of the relevant basic information for a player to get a general idea of what is going on. Much of this information would have been known anyway by anyone who happened to play the original Fallouts, but unfortunately, most of the audience nowadays are Bugthestards who think that 3 is the first number and that the numbers 1 and 2 do not exist. As for showing and not telling, how exactly would it be possible for events such as the first battle of Hoover Dam be shown when it happened years before the game even started? And the reason why is because Bethesda insisted that New Vegas be set after the events of Fallout 3, which caused the timeline to have to be moved considerably. Because let's not forget that the story of New Vegas is based on Van Buren, which is the real Fallout 3 that was never finished or released, because Bethesda stole the franchise from its rightful owners, so the real Fallout 3 never happened. Fallout New Vegas is the closest we may ever see to a real Fallout 3. Now, the story, of course, had to be modified because Bethesda fucked everything up with Fallout 3, which is why Harold is completely missing from New Vegas, where he would have played a prominent role, and his story would have been resolved in a spectacular way, which unfortunately was fucked over by Emil Pagliarulo. Every story has to have a starting point, and it is not feasible to cover the entire history of a universe to show literally everything. It is more ideal to be shown rather than told if it is feasible, but it is not feasible for events which happen outside of the scope of a story, whether that scope be in terms of the time frame or the location. Likewise, Matten pulls his typical slander bullcrap when talking about Legate Lanius, and how we only hear about him anecdotally until we finally meet him at the end of the game. The thing is, how are you going to be shown what Lanius is and what he has done when his exploits are all east of the Colorado and thus completely outside of the scope of the game? How are you going to be shown what happened in Arizona or Colorado when the game is almost entirely confined to Nevada? While showing is certainly far more ideal than telling, it isn't always feasible. However, if it weren't for the time constraints that Bethesda imposed on Obsidian to develop New Vegas, then perhaps we might have been shown rather than told about Lanius, because it is a well-known fact that Obsidian did intend for there to be Legion cities east of the Colorado, but these were ultimately cut. Who can say what we might have been shown there about the Legion and about Lanius in particular, which might have helped to redeem the faction and this character to some extent by giving some level of nuance to them. In the Fallout universe, we're also told that the Great War happened, and we are told about events that happened even before the point of divergence, such as World War II. Does the Fallout franchise need to show these events to us? They happened centuries before the game is set. We don't need to be shown the Great War. Is it not enough that we are shown the aftermath of that war? Likewise, if you want to see the aftermath of the first battle of Hoover Dam, all you have to do is head over to Boulder City, or what remains of it. The They Went That Away quest leads you there and ends there anyway. So if you play the game in the conventional way that you're directed towards, then you will end up in Boulder City to confront the Great Khans, and there you will see a city in ruins. Within Boulder City, there is a memorial commemorating the NCR who died during the first Battle of Hoover Dam. You can talk to Private Kowalski and get some exposition on that first battle. Matten argues in bad faith that the prologue narrated by Ron Perlman provides exposition and that characters in the world don't. This argument by Matten is blatantly false. It is yet another of many lies he tells in order to slander New Vegas and dick ride Fallout 3, so he could get to that secret meeting at the Greenbrier along with Oxhorn and the other shill YouTubers so they can market Fallout 76.
My specialty is in online marketing.
As I said, you can skip the Ron Perlman narration with a single button press, and doing so doesn't cause you to miss out on anything because all of that and more is told later on within the game. Private Kowalski, Chief Hanlon, Joshua Graham, and many other characters you encounter will provide you with exposition about the first Battle of Hoover Dam. Even Easy Pete, one of the very first characters a player is likely to encounter in the game, he fills you in on the gist of what happened. But anyway, whether we are talking about the prologue of the Courier or the prologue of the setting, either way, that is simply the prologue, not the story. The story is how the game unfolds and how it is shaped by the various characters in that story, which does include the Courier, but not only the Courier. The Courier being shot in the head matters, because it marks the point when the platinum chip fell into Benny's hands. It is that platinum chip and who happens to possess it that will likely decide the fate of the entire Mojave. That platinum chip is as significant to the story of New Vegas as the One Ring is to the story of the Lord of the Rings. The Courier's motive for hunting Benny down could have less to do with revenge and more to do with a sense of duty, because as a courier, it is their duty to deliver the package to Mr. House, as was agreed upon. In order to fulfill that duty, which the courier has sworn to do, they have to get back the package which was stolen. That's nothing to do with revenge. If players want to make it be about revenge, then they can do so. They can also ignore him entirely and do the NCR thing. All of these options are possible. And that is the story of New Vegas. The story is what the player makes of it, and that is what makes New Vegas superior to any Bugthestards game.
Of course, there's choices. You can choose who, like, in what direction you want to take the story. It can be, independent New Vegas. You can join Mr. House, NCR, Legion.
Don't forget Elijah, the technical fifth faction you can side with in Dead Money, if you have very poor NCR reputation.
Years later, when a mysterious blood-red cloud began to roll across the Mojave, then west toward the Republic, no one knew where it had come from. Only that it brought death in its wake. Attempts to find the source of the toxic cloud failed. The Mojave was cut off. Through the cloud, lights were seen from Helios 1. There were stories of ghosts immune to gunfire who struck down anyone they saw with rays of light. The last chapter of the Mojave came when a modified Repcon rocket struck Hoover Dam, releasing a blood-red cloud, killing all stationed there. All attempts to penetrate the cloud and retake the dam failed, and both the NCR and Legion finally turned away from it, citing the place as cursed. In the years that followed, the legend of the Sierra Madre faded, and there were no new visitors to the city. Only 2 remained alive in the depths of the cloud at the Sierra Madre, waiting for their new world to begin again.
In that regard, of course, New Vegas has a good story, but the actual, like, the core story of New Vegas is not really that interesting.
Why isn't it? And do keep in mind that the core story of New Vegas is not a mailman getting shot in the head and then getting revenge on the one who did it. That is not the core story of New Vegas. The problem is you are too TLDR to comprehend what the core story of New Vegas actually is. New Vegas is a struggle between opposing political ideologies. Or at least that is what the war is about. At least these factions stand for something and believe in something. You can sit down with them and have a conversation and listen to what they believe. You simply cannot do that in Fallout 3. Colonel Autumn just says you again, and you cannot have a conversation with him. Again, I invite you to read the article titled The Murky Genius of Fallout New Vegas. The war over Hoover Dam feels like a real war and not some unnuanced Transformers bullshit with a giant robot like Fallout 3 does. Hopefully that article isn't too TLDR for you, but if it is, then that means your opinion on what is or is not a good story is invalid, because stories involve reading, and if reading is too much for your puny mind to handle, then how can you be qualified to say what is a good story or not?
Whereas with Fallout 3, you're kind of chasing down your dad.
Oh, good. Chasing down my dad. Sounds like $60 well spent. 10 out of 10. I mean, who wants to have their own adventure and make their own decisions, right?
Across the wasteland.
Chasing your dad across the wasteland. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you just blast New Vegas because of your erroneous claim that you have to track down Benny across the wasteland? You praise Fallout 3's story because you're forced to track some guy down across the wasteland, yet you just said New Vegas' story sucks because you claim it's about getting shot in the head and tracking down some guy across the wasteland. Do you even see your own hypocrisy here? And as I explained to you, tracking down Benny is optional under the NCR path. You can complete the game without tracking him down, but you can't complete Fallout 3 without finding your dad. And by the way, your character is 19 years old. You're an adult. You should be free to do your own thing regardless. Your character in Fallout 3 is called the Lone Wanderer, right? You're called the Lone Wanderer. You're not called the joined at the hip of my dad-erer. And the game should treat you accordingly, but it doesn't. The game treats you exactly as it says on this baby book. You're special. You see that baby on the cover? That's how the game treats you, from beginning to end. You can never make your own choices, and you can never be the main hero. You're just some kid, some 19-year-old kid who lives under his dad's thumb. We've all been there and done that. Why would you want to spend $60 on a game that puts you back under your dad's thumb when most people are waiting to be free of their parents and go do their own thing? Even if you are a kid in real life who is in that situation and being told what to do by your real parents, why would you want to play a game that puts you in that same situation when you're living that in the real world anyway? Video games are meant to be an escape from reality. Even if living under your parents' thumb is your reality in real life, why would you willingly want to play a game that puts you in that situation? It doesn't make any sense. Unless you happen to have a submissive, servile, beta sort of personality. And if that's the case, well, maybe that's part of why James left. He was disgusted that his son is 19 years old and won't grow the fuck up and be a man. I don't know how old you are, Dashing David, but your avatar thing has a beard, so I'm assuming you're an adult. So why don't you want to be an adult in a video game? Or are you really just a kid and you've been taking Oxhorn's patented beard pills? Even kids don't generally want to be treated like kids. It becomes even more sad when you see adult gamers who look up to a digital father in a video game. Like, what the fuck? The great thing about New Vegas is that the game treats you like an adult. From beginning to end, you make your own decisions. If you end up under someone's thumb, it was because you chose to put yourself under that thumb. Fallout 3 forces you under James's thumb. It's not a choice. If you couldn't tell, I'm not a child. Nor was I a child in 2008 when Fallout 3 came out. Fallout 3 tells you in no uncertain terms that your character is 19 years old. Fallout New Vegas does not tell you how old your character is, but it's quite obvious that in New Vegas your character is an adult. But the age is not defined like it is in Fallout 3. But with how Fallout 3 treats your character, it's more like you're about 16 at most, not 19, because 19 is considered an adult, right? But the game doesn't treat you like an adult, does it? It's just really sad that your character is treated the way it is. But what is even more sad is that there's a lot of people like you who have no self-respect and are okay with being treated like that. I'm sorry that you're okay with being treated like a dildo, Dashing David, but I am not okay with it.
I'm trying to figure out, pick up this trail, where is he at?
Who cares? It's not like he cared a great deal about what would happen to you and Jonas as a direct consequence of him leaving the vault like he did. Jonas is dead because of him, and you were likely to meet the same fate. Only by virtue of being the demigod player character were you able to fight your way through all the guards and escape. And you do have to fight them, because it's not like they can be talked down. James is as surprised to see you again as Benny is when you confront him in the Tops Casino. Benny, of course, shot your character in the head and left you for dead. James may not have shot you in the head, but he may as well have done, because Jonas was murdered by the Overseer, and you were just as likely to share the same fate. But you are the player character, and you have VATS and all that shit, so you're able to fight your way through it despite the odds. The funny thing about Fallout 3 is that certain characters matter, but others are treated as disposable. The game revolves around finding your dad. He is the most important character in the game, even more so than the player character. The Lone Wanderer is a demigod who can freeze enemies in place in VATS, but James is more than a demigod in this game. He is God. He is immortal and cannot be killed.
Son, I brought you into this world. I think you know the rest.
When he does finally die, it's by his own hand. That just goes to show how omnipotent he is. Only he has the power to kill himself. No one else can do it. Too bad Jonas is a mere mortal. Jonas was supposed to be James's friend, right? But James callously kicks him to the curb and directly causes him to be brutally murdered. The death of Jonas is James's fault, but James don't give a shit. When you finally catch up with James, you cannot inform him of Jonas's death, and he never asks. That's how disposable Jonas is. Keep in mind that Jonas is black. And who does the voice of James? Liam Neeson. And what does Liam Neeson think of black people? He has admitted that he wanted to kill an innocent black man. This isn't some fictional character in a video game or a movie. This is what the real Liam Neeson said he wanted to do. And this is who Bethesda hired to do the voice acting for the single most important character in Fallout 3. There's no shortage of reasons why Fallout 3 is garbage, but this right here is a very significant reason which should not be overlooked. And it is very
apt
that Liam Neeson wanted to kill an innocent black person because the character he voices in Fallout 3 does precisely that. Jonas is dead because of him, and he doesn't give a fuck. By the way, James's wife, the mother of the lone wanderer, also is black. And you know what? James doesn't seem too distraught over her death either. And why did her death even happen at all? In Fallout New Vegas, the courier is shot in the head twice and left for dead in a grave. But even so, Victor was able to dig them out and rush them to Doc Mitchell's house where they were saved. And it might seem far-fetched, but people getting shot in the head and surviving the ordeal does happen. Just ask Gabrielle Giffords. But what makes it even less far-fetched is the fact that in this franchise exists these magical things known as stim packs. Got shot in the head? Well, just inject yourself with a stim pack and you'll recover. And keep in mind that James is a medical doctor. There's absolutely no reason Catherine should have died during childbirth like she did, because James is supposed to be a medical doctor, and stim packs are a thing that exists in this franchise. If the courier could survive being shot in the head, then why couldn't Catherine survive giving birth to the lone wanderer? Just as James doesn't give a shit about his so-called friend, Jonas, so too does he not give much of a shit about his wife, Catherine, or his son/daughter, whom he abandons to share the same grim fate as Jonas. James also doesn't give much of a shit about Megaton if you blow it up. He says he is, quote, disappointed in you, and that he will talk about it later, but it never happens. He still, quote, loves you, and he just doesn't care that all those people are dead, because just like Jonas, they are disposable and they don't matter at all. They don't matter to James, nor do they matter to the game in general. Only Moira somewhat matters, because she's the quest giver for a quest Bethesda put a lot of work into. That's why she alone manages to survive the destruction of Megaton. But everyone else is fucked. A few years ago, I came across a Reddit post by someone named Tagaziel called James is a Psychopath. This is a very long comment, so I'm not going to read the entire thing to you because it's probably too TLDR for you to comprehend. But I will try to go over the more important points. And if you or anyone else do want to read the full post, you can find it on Reddit. To understand why James is a psychopath, you have to understand what a psychopath actually is. The TLDR of it is that a psychopath has no empathy for others. There's more to it than that, but that's the TLDR version in a nutshell. And that describes James perfectly, because he does not give a shit about the people he uses and throws under the bus. He is reckless with the lives of other people, and even with his own life. Now, let's read some of this comment here. We already covered how he threw Jonas and the Lone Wanderer under the bus. Let's move ahead to this part about Rivet City. James effectively forces the Rivet City team to travel to a super mutant-infested locale on his demand. He doesn't care about the dangers to them or himself. In fact, we can observe his confidence and assertiveness in each conversation and interaction he has with people. Assertive and confident, but mostly he appears forceful. The way he manipulates Lee into doing his bidding is a good example. Moving on further, the comment says, the moment Catherine dies, he loses interest in Project Purity and abandons it. He heads for Vault 101 without caring for the project or its participants. Inside the vault, he shows some control, but the moment he renews interest in Project Purity, he starts stealing equipment and technology to run his tests, bringing Jonas in and effectively condemning him to death. As pointed out above, he decides to leave the vault on a whim, not telling even his child, officially so that they can stay safe, with an egotistic, violent overseer with a personal goon squad. Funny how James, with all his medical knowledge, failed to realize this. Yep, that's pretty much like what I said. From the overseer's perspective, James is stealing equipment and putting the entire vault in jeopardy by his actions. The game treats Overseer Almodovar as this evil person, and in fact, he is even classified as evil in the game files. So you gain karma for killing him, even though Amada hates you for it. The game arbitrarily classifies him as evil, yet there is a logic to his policies. All one needs to do is look at Vault 3 in Fallout New Vegas and see why his isolationism does have merit. Is wanting Vault 101 to not suffer the same fate of Vault 3 such a terrible thing that it makes him evil for it? Well, the game says it does. In no uncertain terms. We can debate the pros and cons of it, but the fact is there's a war going on with the big bad enclave and horrors far worse than the radroaches, which the vault security struggles to handle. If these guys have such a hard time with roaches, then how are they going to handle Deathclaws and all the other shit out there? Remember, they aren't demigod player characters like the Lone Wanderer is. They can't use VATS and other cheap, gamey bullshit to gain an unfair advantage. They would be fucked in the world outside that vault. If you struggle with radroaches, then you sure as fuck should not be opening up your vault to things far worse than that. Speaking of radroaches, there's another thing I'd like to add to the argument of James being a psychopath. James takes advantage of the radroach infestation to make a break for it. The security guards struggle to deal with these low-tier enemies, and several people end up dying. This is another thing which James does not give one flying fuck about. Let's not forget, also, that James is a motherfucking doctor. You know who would come in handy during a radroach infestation? A doctor. Someone needs to treat the radroach bites. But James, the guy who took a Hippocratic oath and all that shit, abandoned his responsibility just as he abandoned his friend and his son. And you're saying it's a great story that we track down this psychopath and rescue him? Fuck him. Numerous people are dead as a result of his irresponsible and reckless behavior. James has no right to be disappointed in the Lone Wanderer for blowing up Megaton when James himself kicked a bunch of innocent people to the curb, and many of them ended up dead because they got fucked over by a psychopath. Like father, like son, I suppose. This is a screenshot from the Fallout Wiki about the chaos surrounding the radroach infestation and James's departure. Many people ended up dead either because of the radroaches or by the vault security as a result of the Overseer's brutal crackdown because of James's irresponsible and reckless behavior. If James had stayed behind, the radroach infestation still would have happened, and people still may have died, but the death toll would have been far lower because, number one, there would be a medical doctor on hand to treat the wounds, as opposed to the medical doctor fucking off and leaving people to die without any medical care. And number two, there would not have been the brutal crackdown from the Overseer. We can argue about how the Overseer was right or wrong for ordering the crackdown, but the fact is, the crackdown happened because of James, and people died because of it. So James has blood on his hands, but he doesn't give a shit because he's obsessed with some pet project of his that matters more to him than the lives of innocent people. To explain his motives, James quotes the Bible.
Revelation 21:6. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely.
Great. Another religious whack job, just like Oxhorn. Religion is the biggest scam ever written. You can be sure that if James managed to complete that purifier, he would not give that water of life freely, as the Bible quote says, but hold it hostage and only give it to people who accept the good book of Christianity. Just like all those missionaries who go to third world countries to, quote, help people who live in poverty. But the help is only given on the condition that they convert to the phony bullshit that the missionaries are trying to push on them. Very disappointing to see that this bullshit is carrying on in the post-apocalyptic world. But, as Ron Perlman says in the narration, war never changes. And what is the cause of 99% of wars? Religion. You see this in New Vegas also, with Joshua Graham and Daniel marketing their scam to the innocent tribes in the Honest Hearts DLC. Very sad that these people are being brainwashed and indoctrinated by bullshit which will destroy their distinct culture and identity, much like religion has done to countless people throughout history. After Graham and Daniel are done with them, the Sorrows will be a bunch of Bible-thumping, warmongering bigots. Sure, Graham is helping them by teaching them various things and helping them to fight against the Whitelegs, but it comes at a heavy price, and it looks like James is pushing the same scam on the Capital Wasteland. He wants the purifier so he can use it as leverage. Having that purifier gives him power because he controls who lives and who dies, simply by who gets that water and who is denied it. The water purifier could be a good thing if the water it generates gets distributed to everyone who needs it and without conditions. But if James is going to start in with his I am Alpha and Omega Bible bullshit and places the condition that people accept Jesus as their savior and all that crap, then is the purifier really a good thing? Whoever owns that purifier has immense power and leverage. I don't know exactly what James's motives are, but the fact he throws innocent people under the bus to further his own goals is all the proof I need that he is not a good person. He may have the ambition of setting himself up as the dictator of the Capital Wasteland, And that purifier would give him the leverage to do just that. But who cares about Jonas, right? Anyway, I was going to read more from that Reddit comment, but I think I've already covered most of the salient points as well as adding a few of my own. So I'm just going to call it good. But feel free to read it yourself if you like.
He eventually sacrificed himself to save you and everybody else.
Who exactly was saved by his, quote, sacrifice? If he had managed to take Colonel Autumn out with him, then his sacrifice might have actually meant something and accomplished something, but of course that didn't happen because of a contrived Deus Ex Machina syringe, which Autumn conveniently happened to have, and injected himself with it at the last moment. And James just stands there like an idiot and lets him do it, and just watches him do it. But even if he had somehow managed to kill Autumn, what would it have mattered? As I explained earlier, the East Coast Brotherhood of Steel undergo a dramatic transformation after Fallout 3, where Elder Lyons and his daughter conveniently die off in a contrived manner, just like Poochie on The Simpsons. And the BOS become a bunch of mutant-hating fascists in power armor, just like the Enclave they fought against in Fallout 3. So what did it matter? Going back to that Reddit comment about James being a psychopath, Tagaziel posits that James's suicide is an act of spite. Here is what he or she wrote. Finally, the motivation for suicide. It's spite. He could work with the Enclave to subvert their goals, negotiate with Autumn, in a way that isn't basically telling him to go fuck himself with a rusty rake, or, hell, anything that doesn't involve killing everyone off and dooming his kid to fighting Enclave mooks for the rest of the game. But no, when he realizes he won't have his candy, he kills himself, Autumn, and everyone in the control room. To be honest, I'm not sure if I agree with that conclusion, but it is a possibility and something to consider. I personally think the problem with James's character might not be so much that he is a psychopath, but that he is badly written, just like the game as a whole. James very well may be a psychopath, and seems to fit the criteria of one, but you could also attribute it to bad writing. Saying that James is a psychopath might be giving Emil Pagliarulo more credit than he deserves. But either way, the suicide accomplished absolutely nothing other than to make James into some sort of martyr according to the game. But it really shouldn't, because a martyr isn't someone who kills themselves. A martyr is someone who was murdered in cold blood. You know, someone kind of like Jonas. Just saying, why don't we honor Jonas as a hero? Committing suicide is a cowardly and selfish act. The morality of Fallout 3 is fucked up because it tries to glorify suicide as some sort of noble act. The player character is even pressured to do the exact same thing at the end of the game, and they get branded as a coward by Ron Perlman if they don't. The Broken Steel DLC allows the game to continue past this retarded ending, but it doesn't really fix the problem because Ron still brands the player a coward and evil for not committing suicide for no reason. James wasn't brave for committing suicide. He was a coward for it. All that he accomplished was to earn a Darwin Award.
And then you were trying to purify the water for the wasteland.
Do I look like a Brita water filter to you?
Which I think is a good story.
If you think that is a good story, then that just means that you don't think.
That's the short version. Obviously, there's more to the story than that.
Care to elaborate on that? Or is it too TLDR for you?
But I think it's an actual decent story.
Why?
Whereas Fallout New Vegas is just kind of like, who shot me?
Because getting shot in the head is all that is going on in the entire Mojave, right? It's not like there's a war going on between various political ideologies and the nuanced interactions between various people. Nope, it's just some mailman getting shot in the head and nothing more to it than that, right? Well, even if getting shot in the head were literally all that New Vegas were about, I'd still say that's a lot more interesting than being daddy's little helper for a giant Brita water filter.
And I'm with the majority of the community.
The like-dislike ratio on your video tells a different story.
About Fallout New Vegas being the better of the three like open world 3D games. But it's starting to get to the point where people are really, starting to talk shit a lot about Fallout 3.
You mean telling the truth about Fallout 3? If you think people are talking shit about Fallout 3, it's just because Fallout 3 is a shit game and people are just telling it like it is. And you can't handle the truth. If someone tries to talk some sense to you, you just dismiss them with a TLDR. Then you whine and cry in videos like this, and you expect people to kiss your ass, yet you won't show them any respect by hearing them out on what they have to say, and if you did, you would see that the criticisms against Fallout 3 are legit and have merit.
I've seen a lot of people on Facebook and Twitter and shit like that hating on Fallout 3 without realizing the game's... You got to remember, the game's almost 10 years old at this point. Not to the date, obviously. It'd be like October 23rd or something like that. 2018 would be 10 years. But it's almost a decade old.
Well, it is over a decade old now. Over 11 years old as of this recording, to be precise. What does that matter? New Vegas is almost as old. As a matter of fact, right now, I think New Vegas is the same age at this time that Fallout 3 was when you made your video. Yet, New Vegas is great, but Fallout 3 is garbage. But they're both almost the same age. They use the same engine, the graphics are the same. As you are so quick to point out, New Vegas even reuses many of the same assets. So, on the surface, both games seem very similar, but if you look below that surface, there is a vast difference in quality due to the design and the writing. By saying that people shouldn't criticize Fallout 3 because it is a decade old, you are implying that Fallout 3 is a disposable commodity rather than an art. And you're not wrong. This seems to be the exact same attitude that Bethesda themselves have towards the game, considering how they are perfectly content to leave it in its broken state and not do anything to fix the numerous bugs the game suffers from and has suffered from for the decade since it came out. The version of Fallout 3 available on Steam is some broken Games for Windows Live version which doesn't work on 64-bit Windows without modding. But Bethesda sells a version of Fallout 3 on GOG which works fine on 64-bit Windows. So they do know how to correct the issue, and they already have with that GOG version. They just don't give a fuck to fix the version on Steam, though doing so would be extremely trivial. They leave it to the community to deal with it, and the same goes for the endless bugs the game suffers from. Stuff like the Ghoul Ecology perk giving a damage bonus to everything when it is supposed to only apply to ghouls. This is just one example of many broken things in Fallout 3. And to be fair, New Vegas has similar issues, as does every game published by Bugthesda. The funniest thing to me was when Bugthesda took the time and effort a few years ago to remaster Skyrim, but they left all of the bugs perfectly intact, though it would have been trivial to fix them, and modders had already done so. The only thing that mattered to Bethesda was how the game looked, so they improved the graphics, but left the game broken and buggy as it has always been. Oh yeah, and don't forget the Creation Club. That was the main reason they remastered Skyrim, so they could shove that into it. If not for the Creation Club, they probably wouldn't have bothered to remaster it at all. And Creation Club even gave them an incentive to not fix the bugs, because why fix bugs when you can sell those fixes as paid mods? The whole thing is a fucking racket and a scam operation run by crooks. A shit game is a shit game no matter how much time has passed. The story of Fallout 3 sucks, and it's never going to get any better. The only one who has the power to overhaul it and potentially make it something decent is Bethesda, and they don't give a shit. They're going to leave it as it is indefinitely. So being 10 years old doesn't matter. If we look back at the game in 20 years, will it be any different? Probably not. In theory, Bethesda has the power to remaster the game, and I don't mean remaster in the Skyrim sense by just putting a new coat of paint on it and leaving everything else unchanged. I mean completely overhauling the story and making it into something actually decent. Chris Avallone is freelance. In theory, Bethesda could hire him, or any actually competent writer for that matter, and redo the story of Fallout 3 and make it good. In theory, that could be done, but I don't see that happening, at least not as long as the company has the sort of management that it does. Maybe one day Robert Altman will be gone and someone who isn't a corrupt crook will take over. Who knows? But I just don't see that happening. So the game isn't getting any better, except from modders. But the problem is modders can't fix the story. And the reason is because no matter how great the writing of a mod may be, it isn't canon. Mods can fix bugs or improve graphics or add in some bare titties or whatever, but mods cannot fix canon. And this is not going to change. No matter if it's a decade from now, 20 years, 50 years, whatever. Do you think that games are a commodity and have a limited shelf life? Or should video games be considered an art? If video games are an art, then they don't have a shelf life and can be critiqued no matter how many years have passed. This is true with other mediums, so why not with video games? The implication that video games are commodities that are only relevant when they are current is why video games are not respected like other mediums. Someone could do a critique on a play by William Shakespeare that was written hundreds of years ago, and that's fine. But if someone does a critique on Fallout 3 that came out only 10 years ago, then they get this bullshit from people like you who imply that this game is a commodity and not an art, and that its shelf life has long passed. Now, if that's the case, then let me just ask you one thing. If you really do believe that Fallout 3 is a commodity and that its shelf life has expired and therefore it is irrelevant, then why do you care so much that people criticize it? Because you're implying that Fallout 3 is old and past its shelf life as a disposable commodity, so people shouldn't care. Well, then why do you care? Why are you butthurt by people having a different opinion? The difference between Fallout 3 and New Vegas is that New Vegas is an art and Fallout 3 is a commodity which has long ago been kicked to the curb by its creator in favor of the latest fad.
You gotta remember that it's Bethesda's first time with the game.
You gotta remember that Fallout 4 and Fallout 76 are Bethesda's second and third time with the game, respectively. And each of these three so-called Fallout games has gotten progressively worse than the last. Bethesda isn't getting any better with experience. The only things improving are the graphics, thanks to improvements in technology, and improvements in gunplay, thanks to contributions from id Software. Other than that, things aren't improving, and in a lot of ways, things are getting worse. Fallout 3 was bad with the removal of traits and dumbing down of the dialogue. Fallout 4 doubled down on that even further by eliminating skills and eliminating speech checks. Fallout 76 eliminated NPCs entirely. It's as if Bethesda is constantly trying to outdo themselves to make each successive game even worse and more unnuanced and shallow than the last. Fallout 3 is the first so-called Fallout game they've made. But what's the excuse for Fallout 4 and 76 being just as bad, if not worse? And since Fallout 3 was their first Fallout, as you said, then maybe they had no business taking the franchise away from its rightful owners. As you say, they didn't have a clue what they were doing, but Black Isle did. If Bethesda didn't buy the game, then we could have had a real Fallout 3 instead of an Oblivion with guns. By the way, you're wrong about saying this was their first time working on the game. Their Fallout 3 is Oblivion with guns, and they had already made Oblivion without guns, so they did have some experience, and that's the sort of game they made. Instead of the hero of Kvatch tracking down Martin Septim, it is now the lone wanderer tracking down James. Pretty much the same story. Martin and James are both the main protagonists of their respective games, and both of them commit suicide and become martyrs. All that changed between Oblivion and Fallout 3 was that they added guns into it and subtracted magic. That's why Fallout 3 is called Oblivion with guns, because that is precisely what it is.
They transitioned it from a top-down isometric game to a full 3D open-world game.
Are you saying the original Fallouts aren't open world? You can go anywhere on the map of those games at any time. That's the definition of open world. Bethesda did not innovate anything in that regard. In fact, one could even say that Fallout 3 is less open because half the game is spent locked in an unskippable vault with linear corridors. And then, even after you finally do exit the vault, you have to spend a good portion of the game navigating the linear subway system under DC. Fallout 3 is nowhere near as open as you seem to think it is, and it is less open than Fallout or Fallout 2 for sure. And the same goes for New Vegas, because even though it's the same engine, New Vegas doesn't have that boring 2-hour-long vault intro, and although there is a sewer system under Vegas, it is not mandatory in order to get around the map. In contrast, huge swaths of DC are inaccessible. You can never explore the entirety of DC. The subway system is a cheap method by Bethesda to bypass the bulk of the city, so they didn't have to do the work of designing it. There are only specific places within DC that you can visit, and getting to them requires use of the subway system. So it's not that open of a game. In fact, Fallout 3 might just be the least open of any Fallout game ever made. Not counting Fallout Shelter, or the other spin-offs, of course. As for the original Fallouts being isometric, that's not technically true. They are actually trimetric projection. But I can forgive your ignorance on this because this is a common misconception. You didn't know, but at the same time, you didn't do your homework either. You could have done some research and based your video on solid foundations of facts and logic, as I have done. But instead, you run your mouth about things you know nothing about. It is abundantly obvious that you have never even played the original Fallouts, because you think that the original Fallouts weren't open world, even though they were even more open than Fallout 3 is. The temple tutorial in Fallout 2 notwithstanding, of course. I'm not going to defend that. But you act like Bethesda are some great innovators because they made Fallout open world, which is false because Fallout was always open. If anything, they made it less open with the subway and the long, boring vault intro. That's the opposite of open world, dude. As for making it first person, sure, they did do that. But they also had the deep pockets necessary to do that. But they aren't some great innovators for making this happen either. First-person games have been around a long time, and Interplay wanted to move the franchise in that direction anyway. They just happened to go bankrupt, so it never happened. Bethesda had the money to license the Gamebryo engine. Bethesda didn't make this engine. They licensed it from some Korean company. Feel free to Google about it if you don't believe me. Nowadays, making a first-person game is no big deal. There's a bunch of cheap or even free engines available to do just that, such as the Unreal Engine, which, by the way, The Outer Worlds is made in. It's no big feat to make a first-person game nowadays. But in the late 90s or early 2000s, the story was a bit different. In those days, you either had to develop your own engine, which cost a lot of time and money, or you licensed an engine such as the Gamebryo engine, which costs you a lot of money, but it doesn't take any time or effort because it's already made and you're just paying for the work someone else had done. That's what Bethesda did. You act like they are some great visionaries or innovators, when in reality the situation was they had a lot of money and basically paid to win. They threw money at Interplay and got an established franchise that was far better than anything they could have ever made on their own. Then they threw money at the company that made the Gamebryo engine and got a license for it. Then they combined those two things together. If you have millions and millions of dollars, you can throw money around and do stuff like that. It doesn't take any talent whatsoever.
Like, you gotta remember all these factors. It's not gonna be a perfect game.
Nice straw man. Did you copy that from Oxhorn?
I'm not saying that it's a perfect game. What I'm saying is that it doesn't have to be a perfect game.
He used the exact same straw man bullshit in his infamous In Defense of Fallout 4 shill video.
You're saying, well, I paid my hard-earned money for this game, and so I expect it to be perfect.
And to you, I say the exact same thing I said to him. No one expected a perfect game. No one who says they hate Fallout 3, Fallout 4, or Fallout 76 is saying that they hate the game because it isn't perfect. Hell, let me future-proof this video by throwing in Fallout 5, Fallout 77, and any other future Fallout game that may come out in the years ahead. No one expects them to be perfect. Can I be any more clear than that? New Vegas isn't a perfect game. It's the greatest game ever made, but it isn't a perfect game. There is no such thing as a perfect game. No one expects that. No one hates a game because it isn't perfect. To put those words in your opponent's mouth and then attack that argument rather than what your opponents actually are saying is called a straw man. This is what Oxhorn did in his bullshit video, and this is what you are doing right now. And I'm pretty sure it's also what Matten does in his Fallout 3 is better than you think. But that will have to wait until I get around to tackling it. But no, Fallout 3 certainly isn't perfect. But was it too much to ask that Fallout 3 have traits and nuance? Was it too much to ask that Fallout 3 have an acceptable quality to the writing? Was it too much to ask that we could be the main protagonist of Fallout 3 rather than following in someone else's footsteps? Was it too much to ask that we not be pressured to commit suicide for no reason? I don't need to pay $60 to be told to kill myself. If I want to be pressured to commit suicide, I'll just read the comments on my YouTube channel.
And people will make the argument about Obsidian having the short time to make New Vegas versus how long they had to make Fallout 3. And you're right. I've said that before on my channel as well. But you also got to remember that they went into Fallout New Vegas with, you know, the everything that's been created for Fallout 3. Because if you look at like the character models, they're very similar. They even have some of the same voice actors, if I'm not mistaken. So it's really they took things from Fallout 3 and just added new stuff to it.
And you don't think that Fallout 3 took things from Fallout and Fallout 2 and then, quote, just added stuff to it? Thing is, they didn't add a whole lot of stuff of their own. And I get that this is something you probably don't understand because you are so ignorant of the original Fallouts that I'm quite certain that you never even played them. So you don't understand exactly how much copying and pasting from those games Bethesda did in order to make Fallout 3. The Brotherhood of Steel, Super Mutants, Ghouls, the Enclave, and even Herald are copied and pasted from the original games. And Tim Kaine himself, the creator of the original Fallout, has criticized Fallout 3 for not having new ideas. Tim Kaine said the East Coast should have stories and histories of its own, instead of reusing the Brotherhood of Steel and Super Mutants and all that other stuff from the West Coast. The East Coast should have its own unique history and lore, but it doesn't because Bethesda was lazy and recycled and reused from the previous games. The story of a kid finding his dad is original, but it's not a great story. It's something you would expect a 5th grader to have written. After you find your dad in Vault 112, the next MacGuffin you're tasked with finding is a Gek, which was the main MacGuffin of Fallout 2. Like, couldn't Bethesda have come up with some new MacGuffin to look for instead of recycling this idea from the previous game? And the Enclave were the baddies of the previous game also. Again, it's a copy and paste. New Vegas may reuse some textures for things, but what would be the point of reinventing the wheel? It's the same engine and the graphics are the same. New Vegas runs on all the same platforms as Fallout 3 did. Nothing changed. So why would the textures need to be redone from scratch? Why would you need to completely redo the textures for something like a Nuka-Cola bottle? It's going to be the same all over the world, right? But New Vegas did introduce Sunset Sarsaparilla, and that's something different and unique. There's a lot of little things like that. But reusing textures was unavoidable considering the 18 months they had. If that's all the time you have, it would be a huge waste to spend that time redoing, say, a Nuka-Cola bottle. Far better, in my opinion, to spend that time building a deep, intricate world and writing a great story. And that's how Obsidian spent what little time they had. And I think they made the right decision. Unfortunately, it means they have to face criticism from Bugthestards like you for not remaking those textures when it wasn't necessary to do so. But I guess that's a lesser evil to making sacrifices to what really matters. Say what you like about the reuse of assets, but at least they didn't reuse the Enclave as the main antagonists of the game. Caesar's Legion is completely new. The Brotherhood of Steel return, but they are at the brink of extinction and not the superpower that they were in the original Fallouts. Meanwhile, the NCR, which was a minor power in Fallout 2 and was just a single town in Fallout 1, is now the dominant power west of the Rockies. The point is, things are changing and evolving in Obsidian's Fallout games, but everything is staying exactly the same in Bethesda's games. The Legion and NCR are minting their own currencies, whereas on the East Coast, everyone uses caps and nothing is really advancing or improving. That's why Fallout 3 doesn't even feel like a post-apocalyptic game at all. It feels like the apocalypse just happened or is still ongoing, because no one is doing a goddamn fucking thing to rebuild the wasteland, even though 200 years have passed. But in New Vegas, you see the progress that has been made and is being made. New Vegas is a post-apocalyptic game. Fallout 3 is just simply apocalyptic.
What I mean by that exactly is, like, they didn't necessarily build it from the ground up. Obviously, the world is probably new. It's nothing like Fallout 3's world.
And thank God for that. New Vegas is a post-apocalyptic world, whereas Fallout 3 is an apocalyptic world that has remained an apocalyptic world for 200 years since the bombs fell, and not one goddamn thing has changed.
But, like, they have, similar character models, buildings, weapons, things like that were in Fallout 3, and they just added more variants to guns, more variants to enemies, shit like that. And I'm not even looking at this through, like, nostalgia goggles or nothing. Like, of course there's some nostalgia for Fallout 3. It was the first one for a lot of us. It's what got me into the series and everything. But I'm not even looking at it like that. It's not even a biased thing. It's just like, if Fallout 3 didn't exist at all, we wouldn't even have New Vegas. And we would have Fallout 4, but some people might be happy if we didn't have Fallout 4. But New Vegas would not exist if not for Bethesda's Fallout 3. It's just a simple fact. So for that alone, you should respect at least what Fallout 3 is.
Well, yes and no. We wouldn't have New Vegas, but we would have Van Buren, a.k.a. Fallout 3. For you see, when Interplay went bankrupt and put the Fallout franchise for sale, Troika put a bid on the franchise, but they were outbid by ZeniMax, who had far deeper pockets than they did. But they did place a bid, and had ZeniMax not interfered, it would have went to Troika, where Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky worked at that time. So had Bethesda not interfered and bought the franchise, it would have went to Troika, where the original creators worked, and it would have been in the hands of its rightful owners. Alternatively, if that didn't happen, eventually the game could have been crowdfunded on Kickstarter or whatever, just like Wasteland 2 was back in 2012 during the CRPG Renaissance. New Vegas might never have happened if Bethesda hadn't bought the franchise, but Van Buren or something similar would have happened, and things would have been better off. But because Bethesda got involved, things got fucked up and did not turn out the way they should have been.
The New Vegas community is getting so toxic.
Did you say toxic? Perhaps you should follow Oxhorn's advice and block the toxic Fallout New Vegas community out of your life. It's not like you want to be robbed of joy, right? So go play Fallout 76 and sign up for $100 a year subscription to Fallout First. That way you can have your joy and avoid the toxic Fallout New Vegas community, since you hate us so much.
To the point that on my personal Facebook, I've seen there's this person on there that talks a lot about just Fallout New Vegas all the time. And they just constantly talk shit on Bethesda and Todd Howard and Fallout 3.
Sounds like someone I'd like to meet and shake their hand.
And I can't remember what the post was exactly, and I'm just kind of, this isn't verbatim, but this along the lines of them saying they did not like Fallout 3, they played it for about 30 minutes and could not stand it and quit playing it. And all I can think of is, like, you're talking about a Fallout game, and all you could put into it was 30 minutes, and you basing your entire judgment of the game off of 30 minutes. 30 minutes doesn't even get you out of fucking Vault 101.
Exactly. That just proves the point of how that unskippable linear vault intro is terrible game design. The temple tutorial at the start of Fallout 2 is bad, but it's nothing compared to that goddamn vault intro in Fallout 3. New Vegas gets its respective tutorial quest right. The quest with Sunny Smiles, where she teaches you how to aim a gun and hunt geckos and survival skills at a campfire. For one thing, that quest is completely optional. You can tell her you don't want to do it, and you don't have to. Nothing is forced on you. Also, it feels organic. It takes place in the great outdoors, not in a sealed temple or a vault. You can move around in 360 degrees. It is the exemplar of a tutorial quest. Fallout 3's 2-hour-long tutorial is just shit. If it is causing people to abandon the game after 30 minutes out of boredom, then, well, that just speaks for itself on how bad it is, right? And it's a perfectly legit reason for someone to loathe the game. H. Bomber Guy even pointed out in his Fallout 3 is garbage video that the most popular Fallout 3 mods on the Nexus are the ones which mod the vault intro out. That's how bad it is. All of Fallout 3 is garbage. That awful vault intro, the ending where you are pressured to commit suicide, and the rest of the game in between isn't much better either. The only redeeming things Fallout 3 has going for it are the side quests. But those are like kernels of corn embedded in a turd. I'm not going to say Fallout 3 is 100% shit, but it is 90% shit. The 10% of it that is good requires having to put on some latex gloves and dig through that turd in order to find those edible bits, and for a lot of people, including your friend, it's just not worth it.
You don't even leave the beginning of the game in 30 minutes.
In contrast, you can leave Doc Mitchell's house in like 3 minutes. Just saying.
So how the fuck can you tell me that you have an actual opinion on the game? You have not even given the game a goddamn chance. You haven't even been out of the fucking vault to explore the wasteland and even know what the fucking story is.
Well, I think we've covered what the story is. And that being said, I think it goes without saying that your friend isn't missing a whole lot.
And play it yourself.
You don't play Fallout 3. Fallout 3 plays you.
Here she is convincing the Brotherhood to let you in.
Lions! I know you're in there! I know you can hear me! You open this goddamn door right now!
I guess I'm also here. I'm the player, but And then, when the time finally comes to take back the memorial and kick the Enclave out, who gives the triumphant speeches and leads the charge? Not you!
When we're done with this, everyone can have a nice cold glass of water on me.
Pride, move out!
Hey guys, how's it going? I literally can't even move. I have to watch this play out exactly how the developers want it to.
Like, it's the dumbest fucking concept, but that's kind of how toxic the Fallout New Vegas community is getting, that people don't even fucking play the other Fallout games, they just say that New Vegas is the best.
Do you play the other Fallouts? By which I mean Fallout 1 or Fallout 2? Because I really doubt it.
And I'm not just making this video based off this one person or because of this one person. As with most of my rants on the channel, it's something that I've been wanting to talk about for kind of a while, and then there's that one like person or thing that just kind of just pushes me over the edge and pisses me off, and I gotta fucking rant about it. And this person was it.
Well, from my perspective, this person is you. And also Oxhorn.
And something else I didn't really like about New Vegas, and this isn't even nostalgia or bias or anything like that, I'm not a big fan of the DLCs in all honesty. I love Big Mountain and I love Lonesome Road. But I wasn't a big fan of the Honest Hearts DLC. It wasn't necessarily bad. I love the environment of it, and I love that the map had rain on it. It was kind of nice to see weather in Fallout for the first time. But I absolutely fucking despise the Dead Money Sierra Madre DLC. That is my least favorite Fallout DLC of all time, dude.
Well, it is actually my most favorite DLC, mostly because I love the characters in it and how well written they are and nuanced. I also love the Begin Again theme and how isolated and desolate the Sierra Madre Casino is. I love all these things about it. I can totally understand the exploding collar thing is annoying to most people, but honestly it doesn't bother me too much. I guess it's because I'm a dog, so I'm kinda used to wearing a collar. After the first time I played the game, I remember for the most part where all the traps and the radios are, so I can get through it without too much of a problem. I love Dean Domino, Christine, Dog/God, and even Father Elijah. And even though they are long dead, I also felt for Sinclair and Vera Keys. These are all the characters that are in this DLC, and it's not a lot, but it's a case of quality over quantity. Quality-wise, I'd easily say the characters in this DLC are the best, and that's the real treasure of the Sierra Madre. Most people think the gold bars are the treasure of this DLC, but it's not. It's these characters.
And whereas with Fallout 3, I like them all. You know, I like Operation Anchorage, I like The Pit, I like Point Lookout, and I like Mothership Zeta. So, like, I just wasn't really a big fan of all the DLC for Fallout New Vegas. Like, Sierra Madre, to be honest, dude, that is, I don't know what it is about it, and I know a lot of other people hate it too. I know a few people that kind of liked it or didn't hate it at all. But I got into it about a quarter of the way or half of the way through the DLC, and I was just like, God damn, I just want this to fucking end so I can play Lonesome Road. Because I think I played them in order, if I'm not mistaken. All I know is I saved Lonesome Road for the last. That's what I know. And I just wanted this fucking DLC to end, and I legitimately did not enjoy playing it. And I mentioned this before on the channel, but it's actually kind of been a while. I think that Fallout 3 is the better Fallout game, because it feels like a Fallout game. The world feels like Fallout. And I think that Fallout New Vegas is just a better game, because it's a better RPG experience. With the variants and weapons and mods for the weapons and the way you can level up and the perks and the factions and all that shit. I think it's a better game, but I think Fallout 3 was the better Fallout game. Because in all honesty, when you walk around the Fallout New Vegas map, like, it doesn't really feel post-apocalyptic because you're not really in a city. You're in a fucking desert area.
Dude, you're talking a lot of shit, much of which I've already addressed and debunked. You're confusing apocalyptic with post-apocalyptic. Apocalyptic would be the time when the bombs were falling and the world was destroyed, and the immediate aftermath of that. Whereas post-apocalyptic is the time after things start to settle down and the world can start the slow process of recovering. Don't forget that the game is set in a time when 200 years have passed, so of course the world should be long into the post-apocalyptic phase, and in New Vegas it is. But Fallout 3 is still charred and radioactive, and it looks like the rains haven't fallen since the bombs dropped. Fallout 3 is still very much an apocalyptic rather than post-apocalyptic game. This would be perfectly fine if the game were set a few months or perhaps even a few years, like 5 years at most, after the bombs fell, but not 200 years. As for the desert thing, that just shows you are completely ignorant of the post-apocalyptic genre as a whole, because 90% of the genre is set in a desert. Before I get into that, just let me point out that the capital wasteland in Fallout 3 is a literal desert. You are delusional if you do not see that. It shouldn't be. The game is set in Maryland, which is on the Atlantic seaboard and receives ample rainfall every year. A nuclear apocalypse wouldn't change that fact, especially 200 years later, but for some reason it is a desert. It never rains in Fallout 3, and the landscape looks like it hasn't rained in a very long time. The charred soot from when the bombs fell is still covering everything. Rain should have washed that away, but it hasn't. Also, don't forget the whole plot of the game being the water purifier because people are dying of thirst, which happens to be the case because people are living in a literal desert. Maryland is anything but a desert in real life. But in Fallout 3, it is a desert. It's just a fact. Now, that being said, even though it was dumb for Bethesda to arbitrarily make Maryland into a desert when it makes no sense, a desert setting has always been a trope of the post-apocalyptic genre, right back to a book called A Boy and His Dog by Harlan Ellison. This book is considered the grandfather of the post-apocalyptic genre, and guess what? It is set in a desert. After that book came the Mad Max films, which again are set in a desert. Then came the video game called Wasteland, and you guessed it, it's set in a desert. Fallout 1 and 2 are also set in a desert, and so is Fallout 3, whether you accept it or not. So every Fallout game, and indeed most post-apocalyptic works of fiction in general, are set in deserts. Like it or not, that's just a fact. New Vegas wasn't doing anything strange or peculiar by being set in the Mojave. Not only is that par for the course, but it also had to be the case anyway for continuity, because New Vegas is the continuation of the original Fallouts. The map has moved somewhat to the east, but it's still in the Mojave, and it needed to be because the originals also were set in the Mojave, and it picks up where they left off.
Of course, there's some destroyed buildings and towns and things like that, but it doesn't really feel like you're in a post-apocalyptic scenario. It just feels like a bunch of destroyed places.
Are you trolling here, or what? Please tell me you're trolling.
And to me personally, the DC Ruins area of Fallout 3 is better than like any location in Fallout New Vegas. I love the in and out of the subway tunnels.
So you love linear corridor environments where everything looks the same and you can only travel in a straight line. Okay, got it.
I'll be able to walk down the streets and look at all the destroyed fucking skyscrapers and tall buildings, and you can go in some of them, and some of them you can't, obviously.
I don't remember even a single skyscraper in DC that I could go into. Granted, it has been about a decade since the one and only time I played that game, but I distinctly remember being disappointed by the lack of skyscrapers and there not being even a single one that I could enter. I do remember the subway system skipping past vast swaths of the city where skyscrapers probably did exist, but the game doesn't allow you to go into those areas. It's funny how you just praised the subway system when the subway system is a cheap alternative to developing a complete city that you could explore at the ground level. New Vegas has a ton of boarded up buildings too. The vast majority of buildings in New Vegas can't be entered, but at least you can enter the areas where those buildings are located. The same can't be said of DC and Fallout 3.
To me, that is that location of Fallout 3, and Rivet City too. Rivet City is one of my favorite locations in all of Fallout. And look, I'm not trying to shit on Fallout New Vegas. Again, it is my favorite of the series so far in terms of just overall how the game is. But I just want to point out some of the flaws with Fallout New Vegas, at least that I see in it.
Such as it being post-apocalyptic rather than apocalyptic, or that it's set in a desert. You are saying these are flaws, but I don't see them as such. How about you point out some real, actual, genuine flaws of New Vegas? For example, the fact that there are no Legion settlements or Legion companions to provide some sort of nuance to that faction so that they aren't universally dismissed as being evil fascists. That would be a real, legit criticism for New Vegas. As would criticisms about the infamous invisible walls or the fact that a lot of the game feels incomplete or that the game as a whole feels somewhat rushed. All of these criticisms are valid, but all of them stem from the 18-month time constraint Obsidian had to work under. The reuse of textures from Fallout 3 also falls under that by necessity, and also I don't see it as a major flaw that they didn't reinvent the wheel with textures when and where they didn't need to. I think with this and a lot of the other flaws you cite in New Vegas, you were just grasping at straws. I've watched, analyzed, and dissected your video up to this point, and you have not cited any flaws in New Vegas that I find to be very compelling.
Because I'm sick of seeing people with shit all over Fallout 3. Like, Fallout 3 is OG. Like, that's the one you have to like that one, or you can't like these other ones. Because if not for Fallout 3, these other ones would not goddamn exist.
No, Fallout 3 is not the OG. The OG is the original Fallout made by Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky back in 1997. That is the OG. Well, I guess one could argue that the OG is actually Wasteland that came out back in 1988. The reason Fallout was created in the first place was in part due to the fact that EA had the franchise at that time, even though they weren't doing anything with it, and so Interplay couldn't make a sequel to Wasteland. So Fallout was made in part as a spiritual successor to Wasteland. So yeah, you could easily say that Wasteland is the OG which all Fallout games derive from. And maybe history will repeat itself, because now Obsidian has been robbed of Fallout and can't work on it, just as Interplay was robbed of Wasteland and couldn't work on that back in the day. But now Obsidian is Microsoft owned, and Microsoft has very deep pockets. I could very easily see a spiritual successor to Fallout come about at some point in the next few years. And if that happens, well, all I can say is you can keep your goddamn Fallout 3. We will have something that is far superior.
And none of the Fallout games are perfect. Fallout 3 has its fucking faults, so does New Vegas, and so does 4. None of them are perfect, but I just want to point out some of the reasons why I think that Fallout 3 is still a great game. It holds up to this day, I think. Now, if it came out today, if Fallout 3 was a brand new game and it came out today, yeah, I probably wouldn't think it's as good as I do think it is, but again, it's a fucking old-ass game.
It isn't that old. If that is old to you, then what is the original Fallout? What is Wasteland, for that matter?
For people to wait almost 10 years later to really start shitting on Fallout 3.
Have you been living under a rock all these years? You do know that people have been shitting on Fallout 3 since it came out, right? Actually, people were shitting on it even before it came out, because back when Bethesda acquired the franchise and word came out that they were working on Fallout 3, people immediately started to fear that it would turn out to be just like Oblivion. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. Anyway, criticism against Fallout 3 is nothing new. If you need proof, here's a contemporary image from around the time the game came out, and it shows many of the criticisms people back then had towards the game. A lot of these criticisms are still discussed today, but some have fallen out of use. But these were many of the talking points of Fallout 3 critics at the time.
Seems a bit ridiculous to me. Like, of course a game that's that old is going to have its fucking faults.
No more than it did when it came out. And New Vegas is almost as old. So what's your point? They're both almost the same age. The original Fallouts are a decade older. Why are those games good when they're a decade older than Fallout 3? How come they are good games, but Fallout 3 is garbage? Has nothing to do with age, my friend.
Problems. So let me know in the comments below if you...
Why? So you can TLDR those comments? I think not. Instead, I'm going to do a video response, which you cannot TLDR. What do you think about that?
dealt with this toxic side of the Fallout community, the Fallout New Vegas, like, master race community. It's legit like the PC master race thing, where it's like, you know, people in consoles are just below you. And it's kind of how it is now with Fallout New Vegas. Like, you can't talk about 3 or 4, because Fallout New Vegas is master race. It's the best one, hands down. Don't get me wrong, guys, I still love Fallout New Vegas, but just part of this fucking community is starting to turn me on the game, and I don't like that. I don't like that people have that kind of influence over me. But they're starting to make me like not like the game as much as I used to, and I fucking hate it. Anyways, if you want to enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, turn on notifications, follow me on Twitter, links to my social networks are in the description. And in the outro. Later, guys.
Conclusions, all the things that we thought we were losing. I'm a ghost and you know this. That's why we broke up in the first place. Cause I want you to know that I'm ready to go. Heartbeat, my heartbeat. I want you to know whenever you are around. Can't speak, I can't speak.
Well, thank God that's over. Now, let's see. How do I want to end this? Oh, yeah, I know. There's something I always wanted to do.
Nerds, nerdettes, and gamers, game the fuck on.
Yeah, that didn't work out very well. Oh well, at least I tried.